Chapter 28:30. Time was tight, and the task was heavy. Ever since Ji Xinyu returned, she had been so busy that her feet barely touched the ground. Her mind was filled with plans for her master's birthday. She was not in the mood to be sad, let alone think of a certain person. This was her first time doing this, so she was a little confused at first. Fortunately, her senior and junior brothers were willing to help her, especially her senior brother Feng Wuji and ninth junior brother Xie Fenglu. They became her right-hand men. Many things were done without waiting for her orders. For example, writing invitations, arranging banquets, and so on. As for the new trick, she still had to do it. For the past 2 days, she had been having meetings with her senior and junior brothers every night to discuss the new trick. But every time she suggested something, it was rejected. Her sixth senior brother had a terrifying memory. He remembered every trick for her master's birthday in the past 3,000 years. Ji Xinyu could not help but admire him. The day after tomorrow was her master's birthday. Everything else was already in place, but the new trick was still uncertain. Ji Xinyu was so anxious that her mouth was blistering. In the end, she panicked and looked at the baby-faced Xie Fenglu beside her. Suddenly an idea came to her. Ninth brother, why don't you wear colorful clothes to entertain your family? Xie Fenglu's face was immediately filled with fear. Senior sister, don't trick me. I'm a man. I don't want to wear colorful clothes to entertain my family. If people find out, I won't be able to find a wife. Feng Wuji patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry, you're so handsome. Even if you dress up as a bear, there will be plenty of women who want to marry you. Xie Fenglu's name was indeed romantic. He was very popular with women outside. The number of women who wanted to marry him could circle the purple cloud sect twice. Xie Fenglu sighed. Those women are all ordinary. I don't want to marry them. I have to preserve my chastity until the end. Pfft. Ji Xinyu spat out her tea. Her junior brother liked to shock people with his words. Men have chastity too. Then what kind of women do you like? Second senior brother asked excitedly. Xie Fenglu's big black eyes immediately looked at Ji Xinyu and said without hesitation, little senior sister like this. Ji Xinyu raised her hand and gave him a knuckle. Don't be rude. I'm your senior sister. This kind of joke is not allowed. Xie Fenglu looked at her with resentment. You're my senior sister, not my master. How can I be so disrespectful when I like you? Ji Xinyu glared at him. Brat, you almost became my disciple, do you know that? Xie Fenglu leaned against her and put his arm around her shoulder. Fortunately, I had the foresight to not take you as my master. Senior sister, you've already broken off your engagement with that scumbag. How about we have an older sister and younger brother relationship? Ji Xinyu kicked him away along with his stool. It doesn't matter if you have foresight. I don't like immature children. Xie Fenglu nimbly somersaulted in the air and caught the chair that flew out with him. His toes tapped on the beam, and he sat back down on the chair. He looked at Ji Xinyu with his big eyes, feeling wronged. Senior sister, you're so rude. Senior sister has always been this crude. It's not like you've never known. Ji Xinyu didn't think much of it. She had naturally taken note of his nimble movements. Old Nine, your martial arts have improved again. Xie Fenglu immediately held his head high and puffed out his chest. Of course. I've been practicing my martial arts with my head hanging from the beam, so that I can catch up to senior sister as soon as possible. Chapter 28:31. It was just that she had painstakingly thought of a new idea to celebrate her master's birthday, but it was ruthlessly rejected by this brat, which made her a little sad. She even tried to persuade him. Old Nine, look at how beautiful you are. Once you dress up as a woman, you'll be devastatingly beautiful, and outsiders won't be able to recognize you. But master will be able to. When the time comes, you can perform a dance in front of him. Master will definitely be very happy, and senior sister's mission will be completed. And he will also love you even more. If you help senior sister will also love you even more. Don't you want to learn a set of leg techniques from me? After completing this mission, I'll teach you. How about it? Xie Fenglu looked at her with his chin in his hands. Looks like senior sister is serious? Of course, I can't be more serious. The more Ji Xunyu thought about it, the better the idea was. Good. Xie Fenglu suddenly slammed the table, scaring the surrounding senior brothers. Ji Xunyu's eyes lit up. Old Nine, you're too good. Senior sister didn't dote on you for nothing. Xie Fenglu patted his chest. For senior sister, I'm willing to give up everything. However, senior sister, I also have a condition. Speak. The biggest problem was about to be solved, so Ji Xunyu was exceptionally easy to talk to. We're going to do a double dance. I'll dress up as a woman, and you'll dress up as a man. I think we can even arrange a soul-stirring scene. Master definitely hasn't seen such a double dance before, so he'll be even happier. This idea was indeed novel, and all the senior brothers present cheered. Ji Xunyu didn't have any objections to dressing up as a man. After all, she was used to it, so it wouldn't be exposed. However, to arrange a play, it wasn't something that could be done overnight. At the very least, the play needed a script. Ji Xunyu voiced her concerns. Xie Fenglu smiled, then suddenly took out a book from his chest and waved it in front of Ji Xunyu. Senior sister, don't worry. I've already written the script. You just need to perform according to this. Ji Xunyu was stunned for a moment. She took the book and looked at it, then looked at her precious junior brother from the corner of her eyes. So you already thought of this idea. Why didn't you say so earlier? Xie Fenglu smiled, revealing 2 dimples on his baby face. I just wanted to see if anyone had any better ideas. Besides, when I wrote this script, I didn't want to play the role of a female lead. I wanted senior sister to play the female lead, and I would play the male lead. His fellow disciples booed him together. If little junior sister plays the female lead, do you think you'll get the male lead? That's right. The male lead is so handsome. I think eldest senior brother is more suitable for this role. That's right, that's right. Oh, Gio, you're so pretty. You're not suitable for a handsome character. Xie Fenglu was speechless. He chuckled and said, It seems that everyone wants to play a role in the movie. How about this? Why don't you all play the female lead? The senior brothers retreated together. Let's not. Our masculine aura is too strong. If we dress up as women, we'll be seen as evil spirits. Old Nine, you are the most suitable. While everyone was talking, Feng Wuji had already flipped through the script from beginning to end. He then looked at Xie Fenglu with dissatisfaction. This play seems to only have 2 people. Looks like we don't need to appear? Xie Fenglu thought for a moment. Since it's a play for the birthday banquet, of course it has to be short. Of course we'll kill off all the irrelevant people. However, if senior brothers really want to act as extras, I can arrange a few roles for you. Chapter 2832. All the senior brothers expressed their interest and asked him what roles he wanted. Xie Fenglu thought for a while. We're still missing 2 horses, 2 tree stumps, and a bear. How about you guys play these roles? 7 or 8 teacups were thrown at Xie Fenglu. Get lost. Go to hell. Little bastard. Xie Fenglu had already jumped onto the roof beam and caught a stack of teacups. He smiled and said, Senior brothers, this is the first time we've done something like this. Master will definitely be moved to tears when he sees his obedient disciples going all out for his birthday. He might even be happy for an entire year. This birthday banquet was planned by senior sister. If Master is happy, senior sister will be happy too. Don't you think so? I even dare to act as a woman. You guys are just extras, acting as tree stumps or something. It's actually very easy. Xie Fenglu had always been eloquent. After such an eloquent lecture, all the senior brothers were finally moved. Master being happy was one thing. But if they could make junior sister happy too, it was worth considering. After all, junior sister had it too hard. Everyone finally agreed, and was assigned roles. Apart from eldest senior brother, who needed to entertain guests from the outside world, the other senior brothers and junior brothers all took a role and went to prepare. Among them, Xie Fenglu was the happiest. Senior sister, you're going to be with me for the next 2 days. We have to rehearse, are you happy? So this was the kid's goal. Ji Xunyu hugged her arms. Happy, of course I'm happy. Especially when I think of you swinging your sleeves and doing a beauty dance, I'm very happy. Xie Fenglu was speechless. He looked at Ji Xunyu with resentment. Senior sister, Why do I feel like you're not happy but gloating? Ji Xinyu smiled and patted Xie Fengliu's shoulder, almost knocking him down. Good boy, you know the truth. Xie Fengliu rubbed his shoulder. Senior sister, I think you should be gentler. Also, I'm not a child anymore. I'm already 1,200 years old. Ji Xinyu raised her eyebrows. Gentle? You want to find gentleness from me? Little Fengliu, did you take the wrong medicine? He patted him on the shoulder and said, Good boy. No matter how old you are now, you are still a child in my eyes. He smiled and walked out. Xie Fengliu stood where he was, his eyes flashing slightly. Senior sister, you're good at everything, but you're a little too domineering, even more domineering than a man. I have to become stronger so that I can protect you and protect you from the storms of the outside world. Perhaps only then will I be able to see your weak side. Ji Tianyue never thought that Rongyu Yishinlin would send her back to Nantian Palace in just one day. It was indeed a one-of-a-kind wind unicorn. No one else could match its speed. She originally wanted to spend a few days with Rongyu Tianlan and stay at a hotel or something along the way. However, she didn't expect that she would arrive above Nantian Palace in just one day. When the carriage slowed down, Ji Tianyue heard the cheers coming from below. She cautiously lifted the curtain and looked down. Then she saw the familiar building. She was both regretful and happy as she laughed. Brother Rongyu, your car is simply too fast. I've never seen a car that fast. As she spoke, she walked out of the car. Then she froze. Chapter 28:33. There was no one outside the carriage. Rongyu Tianlan, who was supposed to be driving the carriage outside, was nowhere to be seen. The wind unicorn pulled the carriage and quickly landed. The South Heaven Emperor had already heard the news and hurried over. He was very pleased to see his little daughter coming down from such a luxurious carriage. Tianyue, I've received news that His Highness Rongyu personally sent you back. I didn't expect it to be so soon. He looked at the carriage again and only saw the little handmaiden following behind. He was surprised to see no one else. Where is His Highness Rongyu? Ji Tianyue was tongue-tied. The little handmaiden spoke quickly. His Highness Rongyu was driving the carriage outside just now. How did he disappear so quickly? The South Heaven Emperor had already looked inside and outside the carriage. He raised his eyebrows in surprise. His Highness Rongyu has been driving the carriage outside all this time? He didn't rest in the carriage. The little handmaiden nodded. Yes, Her Highness invited His Highness Rongyu in on the way. But His Highness Rongyu refused and said that this carriage must be driven by someone, and only he can do it. So he didn't enter the carriage at all. The wind was too strong on the way, so Her Highness Rongyu couldn't go out. But they kept talking. His Highness Rongyu was still in the carriage an hour ago. The little handmaiden poured out everything that happened along the way. Ji Tianyue's little face turned red. She felt like she had been slapped in the face. She had originally planned to let Rongyu Tianlan park the carriage on the street after she arrived at the Nantian clan. She wanted to let everyone in the city see her and know that it was Her Highness Rongyu who sent her back. She wanted to let everyone know that Her Highness Rongyu treated her sincerely and personally drove the carriage for her. But she didn't expect to fall into the Nantian Palace as soon as she opened her eyes. Her plan to show off was completely ruined. She glanced at the palace maids and handmaidens around her and felt even more upset. She came back in such a flashy carriage, and only a few people saw it. Besides, Rongyu Tianlan wasn't here. She couldn't show off even if she wanted to. The South Heaven Emperor didn't look very good. Although the wind unicorn was unruly and not easy to tame, it was very obedient to its master once it was tamed. He was afraid that as long as Rongyu Tianlan gave a command, this wind beasts would obediently follow his command. There was no need for them to eat and sleep outside to drive the carriage. He did not enter the carriage, and even called for a maid to accompany his daughter. She was afraid that it was not out of concern, but to avoid suspicion. What was Her Highness Rongyu thinking? Did he have that kind of interest in her youngest daughter? Now that he had broken off the engagement with the third princess, if he had no interest in Ji Tianyu, then wouldn't the Nantian clan lose everything? The more the South Heaven Emperor thought about it, the more panicked he became. At this time he finally remembered his third daughter. Oh right, Tianyu, where is your third sister? Originally, Ji Tianyue liked her third sister very much. But after experiencing all this, she didn't like her third sister anymore. Hearing her father's question, she curled her lips and said, she wants to celebrate her master's birthday and return to the Purple Cloud sect. Pausing for a moment, she couldn't help but say, Imperial Father, I didn't expect third sister to be such a loose person, hugging a man in public. This daughter feels that Imperial Father should reprimand her and have her learn some womanly virtues. Otherwise, I'm afraid that our Nantiang clan's face will be lost because of her. Although she broke off the engagement with Brother Rongyue and won't marry Brother Rongyue again, she will eventually marry someone else. Chapter 2834. Although she broke off the engagement with Brother Rongyu and won't marry Brother Rongyu again, she will eventually marry someone else. If her reputation is too bad, I'm afraid she won't be able to find a good family. I'm doing this for her own good, so I couldn't help but report it to Father. South Sky King's face sank. If she was really doing this for her sister's good, she should have only reported it to him after entering the palace, and not in such a public place. There were so many eyes watching and ears listening. She was obviously trying to ruin her sister's reputation. South Sky King's eyes were faintly sharp. Tianyu, you need to have a basis for your words. Although your sister grew up outside and is a bit outspoken, she still has a bottom line when doing things. She would never carelessly hug a man. Imperial Father believed in her on this point. Don't stay here and listen to those gossips outside. Seeing that Father didn't believe her, Ji Tianyu was angry. Father, I saw it with my own eyes. She hugged her master, and she helped her master into the carriage. South Sky King was secretly relieved when he heard her words. When he looked at Ji Tianyu again, his eyes were faintly cold. Her master was injured a while ago, and because of your third sister's matter, he came out of seclusion early and rushed to Misty Mountain to support his disciple. I heard that his health is very poor now, so it's reasonable for him to need someone to help him. He watched your third sister grow up, and a master is like a father. Father's health is not good, so what's wrong with a daughter helping him? Could it be that people will gossip if Imperial Father is sick and needs you to support him? Ji Tianyu was tongue-tied. This, for the first time in his life, South Sky King didn't like this little girl, and his eyes were even colder. Tianyu, your third sister has always been good to you. In this palace, she loves you the most. That year, you had a serious illness and your life was in danger. You urgently needed a rare and fresh medicinal herb as a primer to save you. It was your third sister who ventured alone into that mountain filled with ferocious beasts, found the medicine, and brought it back overnight. She personally watched the imperial physician brew it and fed it to you. Only then was your little life saved. Is this how you repay her? Ji Tianyue's small face turned pale, but she was still somewhat unconvinced. Didn't you say that third sister begged one of her senior brothers to pick this medicine? Why is it that she picked it herself? The South Heaven Emperor sighed. Back then, I didn't believe that your sister had such good martial arts, so I thought that her senior brother had picked it for her. Yesterday, I contacted Sect Master Ziyun, and he said it himself. It can't be wrong. Ji Tianyue pursed her lips. She knew that her third elder sister used to treat her very well. But, however, because of Brother Rongyu, her third sister seemed to dislike her. Moreover, Ji Tianyue always wanted to belittle her third sister, perhaps because she was fighting for a man. Initially, she was angry when she heard people badmouthing her third sister. But now, she couldn't wait for people to badmouth her third sister. She even wanted to step on this elder sister whenever she had the chance. A lot of her words and actions were done subconsciously. She didn't even think about it, right? In her heart, she had always thought that she could let down the world, but the world couldn't let her down. It was natural for her to let down others, but if others let her down, it was unforgivable and should be destroyed by heaven and earth. Chapter 2835. Therefore, once the sister who loved her the most threatened her interests, she immediately became disgusted in her eyes. Third sister did love me, but there are some things that are unreasonable. Tianyue is also worried about sister. She subconsciously defended herself. South Sky King's face completely sank. You're still quibbling. It's father who indulges you too much, making you unable to distinguish right from wrong. Go back to your own courtyard and reflect on it. South Sky King flicked his sleeves and left. Ji Tianyue, she cried loudly, and her crying was very loud. Naturally, it reached the ears of the South Heaven the Arch, who had walked far away. South Sky King didn't come back to coax her because of her crying. He didn't even turn his head. But Ji Tianyue's following words made him stop. Father, are you so angry because you didn't see Brother Rongyu send me back with your own eyes? Do you also want Brother Rongyu to abandon me? South Sky King slightly closed his eyes. He definitely couldn't lose Rongyu Tianlan as his son-in-law. There was already no hope for his third daughter. Was his youngest daughter also going to be lost? No, he definitely couldn't let this matter fall through. He turned around and looked at his daughter, who was crying like a pear blossom in the rain. His gaze became complicated. Rongyu Tianlan felt that there was something fishy about this matter, but he couldn't find out what it was. Thinking about it, he suddenly thought of Shen Jiuli and his wife. In Jun Liuya's previous life, he was just an ordinary person who didn't even know spells. Naturally, he had never seen Ji Yu's soul. Logically speaking, if Ji Yu was also a reincarnation of someone else's soul and spirit, even if Ji Yu's appearance changed, her soul or spirit would still have the shadow of the original body, and even be no different from the original body. Just like him, Jun Liuya was a reincarnation of his soul. Although Jun Liuya's appearance was different from his, if Jun Liuya's soul was taken out, the soul's appearance would also be like Rongyu Tianlan, and not continue to be like Jun Liuya. If Ji Yu was also like this, then her soul should also be like the original body, and not be exactly like Ji Yu. Then who would her original body be like? Would it be like Ji Shenyu? This last thought was like a raging fire that quickly ignited his blood. He felt that he couldn't wait any longer. He really wanted to return to the Tianxi continent immediately and consult the great god and the others. After all, they had witnessed everything. It would not be easy to return to the heavenly bestowal continent. He would need to pass through the space-time gate multiple times. The amount of telekinesis he would need to expend was not small. Naturally, it would require a lot of stamina. If he was fine, these were all side dishes that he wouldn't care about. However, he was still injured, and did not even have half of his psychokinesis left. He needed to rest for a few more days before he could make such a plan. Back then, his back had crashed into a tree, directly breaking a large tree. His back was actually badly injured, but he forced himself to be strong and did not show it. Sending Ji Shenyu to the entrance of the valley, and saying that he wanted to leave with her was just an excuse for him to recuperate alone. After Ji Shenyu left, he found a secluded place, and checked the injuries on his back. They were more serious than he had imagined. If it was in the past, he had the divine skill to protect his body. Even if the impact was several times stronger than this, it might not be able to hurt him. However, in a situation where he had yet to recover from his injuries, the impact was undoubtedly one disaster after another. There were 3 or 4 large bloody wounds on his back, and fresh blood soaked his entire back robe. Chapter 2836. He had the best medicine, so it was not difficult for him to treat his external injuries. After applying the medicine, he was supposed to meditate for a few hours to recover, but he was afraid that the people outside would think too much if he did not go out. Thus, he used a spell technique to cover up his wounds and went out. Then, he sent Ji Tianyue back to Nantian Palace. It was only now that he had the time to properly recuperate. What he needed was a quiet place to meditate. After looking around, he chose a cave. After entering, he remembered that this was the cave that Ji Tianyue had accidentally entered when she was drunk. There was even a little bit of her breath in it. At first, he thought that he would not be able to calm down after smelling her breath, but he did not expect that after sitting down and smelling her breath, he would feel at ease, as if she was protecting him. Thus, he decided to stay in the cave. Originally, he had meditated in the scroll of the universe for 10 days, but at that time, he was restricted by the rules of Misty Mountain and could not use telekinesis to heal. so his recovery was naturally several times slower than usual. Now that there were no such rules, once he calmed down and cultivated, his recovery speed was extremely fast. 3 days later, his external and internal injuries were basically healed, and his telekinesis was almost fully recovered. He walked out of the cave and squinted his eyes to look at the sky in the distance. The sun had just rolled down the mountain. The moon was like a silhouette in the sky. He was about to call for his ride and embark on the journey back to Tianxi continent when the voice transmission talisman at his waist suddenly lit up. He frowned slightly. There were not many people who could contact him on this continent. His imperial father and a few of his friends, including the sect leader of the Purple Cloud sect. The talisman that lit up at this moment was the sect master of Ziyin. Rongyue Tianlan and the sect master of Ziyin were not very close. At most, they had played a few games of chess and discussed spells a few times. The sect master of Ziyin was more than 3,000 years older than him, so they could be considered friends despite the difference in age. At that time, the sect master of the Purple Cloud sect admired him very much. He had once joked that if he had a daughter or a female disciple, he would definitely let her marry him, and let him call him father-in-law or uncle. Let's see if you still dare to be arrogant in front of me. At that time, Rongyue Tianlan didn't take his joke to heart. She calmly tidied up the chessboard and replied to him, I heard that my father is looking for a good marriage for me. Maybe I'll get married earlier than you and have a child earlier. If it's a daughter and you're still single when she grows up, I can reluctantly consider being your excellency's father-in-law. At that time, the two of them were used to teasing each other, and neither of them took these jokes to heart. Moreover, not long after Rongyue Tianlan said these words, he was forced to marry by his imperial father, who wanted him to be betrothed to a baby wrapped in diapers. He was so shocked that he didn't even look at whether the baby was round or flat, and immediately ran away. When he looked back, he was already 100 years old. When he returned after more than 3,000 years, his fiancée had already grown up. Furthermore, she had really become the disciple of the Purple Cloud sect's sect master. The voice transmission talisman was flashing. Rongyue Tianlan was slightly conflicted. Should he pick it up? At this time, the sect master had contacted him to invite him to his birthday banquet. He wanted to see how grand and novel the birthday banquet that his obedient disciple had prepared for him was. In the past, Rongyue Tianlan had attended it a few times. In his opinion, there was nothing novel about it. The only novel thing was that the sect master of Ziyun's eldest disciple Feng Wuji had a few strands of white hair in order to arrange this. Chapter 2837. But this time, this old man's birthday banquet was personally organized by Ji Xinyu. Every time Rongyue Ishanlin thought of this, he felt very unhappy. The sect leader of the Purple Cloud sect invited him over at this time to show off. He still had important matters to attend to, so he didn't need to bother with him. Thinking of this, Rongyue Ishanlin cut off the sound transmission talisman. But the other side seemed to be unyielding. Every time he cut it off, the other side continued to call him a few more times, twinkling like stars at his waist. Why was he in such a hurry? Could it be that something had happened? Could it be that Ji Xinyu? Before he could finish his thought, his hand automatically connected the sound transmission talisman. The sect leader of the Purple Cloud sect's slightly teasing voice came from the other side. Old friend, even if you can't be my disciple's husband, you shouldn't be so angry that you won't even pick up an old friend's voice transmission? Or are you so ashamed that you don't have the face to see me? Rongyue Ishanlin was speechless. He raised his hand and rubbed his temples. I don't think there's anything that I don't have the face to see you. Are you thinking too much? Then why haven't I been able to contact you these 2 days? What cave did you lock yourself in to heal your emotional injury? Rongyue Ishanlin was afraid of disturbing him when he was healing, so he had indeed turned off all the sound transmission talismans. However, he was treating serious injuries, not emotional injuries. He wasn't the kind of person who would lock himself in a cave after suffering emotional injuries. You didn't go through so much trouble to contact me just to say these few words of nonsense, did you? Rongyue Ishanlin didn't like the sect leader of the Purple Cloud sect recently. so he didn't want to talk to him anymore. Hey Rong Yuejun, you're so angry. This isn't like you, who's always so calm and collected. The sect leader of the Purple Cloud sect insisted on talking nonsense. Rong Yuishanlin felt that he wasn't as bored as he was. Just as he was about to turn off the sound transmission talisman, the sect leader of the Purple Cloud sect said, "Tomorrow is my birthday, and it was prepared by my favorite disciple. Don't you plan to come and take a look?" He was indeed here to show off. Rong Yuishanlin said lazily, "I'm busy, not interested. I wish you a happy birthday in advance." He was about to hang up the sound transmission talisman. "Oh, I see. Shinyu. Shinyu, why are you?" The Purple Cloud sect's sect master's cry of surprise came from behind, and then the sound transmission talisman automatically hung up. Rong Yuishanlin stared at the voice transmission talisman that had already dimmed. She clenched her fingers, then clenched them again. What happened to Ji Xinhua? That old fellow had always been as calm as a mountain. Why did he suddenly cry out in alarm? What happened? Logically speaking, nothing should have happened to Ji Xinhua in the Purple Cloud sect. However, it was hard to say. Rong Yuishanlin looked at the voice transmission talisman and hesitated for a moment. She then made up her mind to call back. He didn't know what was going on over there. He dialed several times, but there was no response. The more he couldn't get through, the more anxious Rong Yutionlan became, and the easier it was for him to let his imagination run wild. He dialed back again and again. When he dialed back for the 18th time, and Rong Yutionlan was about to curse, the other side finally got through. However, even though it was connected, there was only the sound of heavy breathing, and no one spoke. Rong Yuetian asked a few questions in succession. Other than the increasingly rapid panting sound, there was no other sound at all. Later on, the sound transmission talisman was completely cut off, and could no longer be connected. Rong Yuishanlin's expression changed. That panting sounded like the panting of someone dying. Could something serious have happened to the Purple Cloud sect? That Ji Xinhua. He raised his hand and called for his own carriage. After sitting in it, he calmed down. Chapter 2838. Xian sect had always been heavily guarded, and every disciple was an expert. Even if there was a powerful demon who wanted to harm them, it would not be able to be taken down in a short period of time. How could Xian sect master be suddenly attacked in the sect? Moreover, he was immediately killed after being attacked. That was too strange, wasn't it? This Xian sect master was not made of mud. He was the top expert of this continent. Now that he suddenly made such a commotion, it was most likely to trick Rong Yuetianlan into going. He would not be fooled by such a simple trick. He would be an idiot if he went. Maybe he would be laughed at by that old man. It was more important for him to rush back to the Tianxi continent. He turned the car around, and with a flick of his finger, the unicorn let out a long neigh and flew into the distance, in the direction of the Tianxi continent. But his speed was getting slower and slower, slower and slower. Ji Xinyu deeply felt that her master's life would be smooth sailing this year, and the birthday banquet she organized for him would definitely be a success. Because on her master's birthday, the sun was unusually bright, the sky was blue, the clouds were white, and a cool breeze was blowing. Such a bright and beautiful weather made her feel bright and beautiful. She had been busy these few days, busy arranging the chores, rehearsing the lines with Xie Fenglu, and rehearsing the program. She slept at 3 and woke up at 5 every day, and even had dark circles under her eyes. This time, whether it was the banquet or the venue, they were all top-notch. Even the chef who organized the banquet was a master chef, who was known as the god of cookery. It was said that the dishes cooked by this master chef could make people willingly die from overeating. This master chef was not like other masters who liked to act pretentious and cherished his words like gold. He was very talkative. The talkative master had told her a strange thing last night. He said that in the evening, Xian sect master actually came to the kitchen and personally killed a pig. Xian sect master's method of killing the pig was very terrifying. He did not directly kill the pig, but instead stabbed the pig's trachea, making the pig wheeze like a bellows, but the pig could not make a sound. The pig's dying appearance was very frightening. Everyone felt that this method of killing pigs was too cruel. So the god of cookery came to ask Ji Xinyu if her master had any psychological problems. Ji Xinyu naturally didn't think that there was anything wrong with her master, but she felt that her master was indeed a bit of a freak. She sent the god of cookery away with a few words. Then, she was still worried, and went to check on her master. While he was paying his respects to his master, he quietly observed his master's expression. Grandmaster Ziyin seemed to be very happy. After brutally killing the pig, her master seemed to have been released. When he saw her, he was also very happy. He even showed some concern about her dark circles, and told her not to be too tired. He also told her that she must get rid of the dark circles tomorrow. It was rare to see such a benevolent master. Ji Xinyu's heart skipped a beat, and she talked to her master for a while. Her master's pair of eyes, which seemed to contain the winding mountains and rivers, often looked at her. The more he looked at her, the more satisfied he was, and the more he looked at her. Ji Xinyu's hair stood on end. Xinyu, have you been unable to sleep these past few days? What big dark circles? I can sleep. I can fall asleep as soon as I touch the bed. Grandmaster Ziyin nodded. That's good. By the way, do you think Rongyue Tianlan will come? Ji Xinyu's heart skipped a beat as she shook her head. I don't know. Chapter 2839. Take a guess. Sect Master Ziyin did not let her go. Ji Xinyu was a little annoyed. If someone else had asked her this question, she would have kicked them away impatiently. But her master, she calmed down and tried to guess. He won't come, right? Why not? He doesn't like to join in the fun. Besides, she paused. Besides, it was not suitable for them to meet again. Rongyue Tianlan must have known this too. So even if he received an invitation, he would not come. Besides what? Besides, we have so many guests, so we don't need him. Why do you care about him? Ji Xinyu changed the topic. By the way, master, why did you go to kill a pig? Sect Master Ziyin only spat out 2 words, heaven's secret. Ji Xinyu was speechless. Killing a pig could lead to heaven's secret? Master was indeed divine. The sun was shining brightly, and the autumn wind was refreshing. The entrance of the Purple Cloud sect was crowded early in the morning, and there was an endless stream of people and carriages. Although the Purple Cloud sect's sect master's birthday was criticized every year, his status was still there. The big shots in the Fanning continent would still come to congratulate him. Of course, those small shots wouldn't let go of any opportunity to make friends with the Purple Cloud sect. They would try to get an invitation to celebrate here. Therefore, on this day every year, the entrance of the Purple Cloud sect would be so lively. Fortunately, the disciples of the Purple Cloud sect were used to dealing with this, and they divided up the work. Some welcomed the guests outside, some led the guests, and some arranged the seats. Although they were busy, they were orderly. There were especially many people this year, because everyone was curious about a new thing. Previously, when Sect Master Ziyin celebrated his birthday, his only female disciple wore a mask, so no one could guess whether she was ugly or beautiful. But this princess had been exposed a few days ago, so this time she would not wear a mask when she came out again, right? Many people did not see the excitement on Misty Mountain, so this time they took the opportunity to come and take a look. The banquet was held in the special hall of the Purple Cloud sect. This hall was specially prepared for Sect Master Ziyun's birthday, and was twice the size of an ordinary sect hall. In the hall, there were special seats specially prepared for the birthday boy and very famous people. And there was also a special stage. When it was almost noon, there were almost 1,000 tables in the hall, and almost all the guests had arrived. Sect Master Ziyin sat at the head of the table, with his chin resting on his hand. Looking at the guests in the hall, his expression was a little lazy. He wanted to celebrate his birthday, so he didn't pay much attention to the gifts from others. Originally, he would not celebrate his birthday with such fanfare. Usually, he would just call some of his good friends and disciples for a gathering. What he wanted was that kind of atmosphere. But this time, his invitation cards were scattered all over the place. Almost all the young geniuses on the Sanskrit continent received one. Sect Master Ziyun's invitation was not easy to obtain. Therefore, everyone treasured this opportunity. Those who received the invitation all came. Even if they didn't receive the invitation, they still thought of ways to follow their acquaintances. As a result, the number of customers this time was unusually high. Ji Xinyu did not expect so many people to come. Looking at the dense crowd, she felt a little dizzy. He began to worry about whether the banquet he had prepared was enough. Luckily, Feng Wuji was the one who prepared the banquet. He had always been a meticulous person. Although his master was a little unreliable this time, he didn't tell them that it was going to be a big banquet. Chapter 2840. Eldest senior brother had always been meticulous. Although his master was not very reliable this time, and did not tell him beforehand that it was a big banquet, he knew that it was not a simple banquet from the endless stream of people in the morning. He immediately sent people to prepare. It would not create an awkward situation where there were too many people, and no one had anything to eat. Ji Xinyu stood in a corner with her arms crossed, looking at the huge crowd outside. People were presenting gifts to the Purple Cloud Sect Master. Because the Purple Cloud Sect Master's birthday was for fun, not to get rich, he did not like expensive gifts. When he asked outsiders for gifts, his number one request was novelty. As long as it was novel enough, he would be happy even if they gave him a cricket cage. It was the same this time. People gave him all kinds of strange gifts. There was a pocket-sized horse less than a meter tall, a mouse as big as a cat, and even a poisonous snake with 5 heads. Ji Xinyu rubbed her forehead. Most of these novelty gifts looked good, but were not useful. Her master would throw them to Feng Wuji after playing with them for a while, and let him handle them. As long as they were not damaged, they could be thrown into the storage palace. However, these living creatures often gave Feng Wuji a headache. Raising them was a problem. Later, Feng Wuji decided to do something violent. He threw all these living creatures into a valley with abundant water and plants, leaving them to fend for themselves. These animals killed each other in there. It was a natural selection. Usually, out of 10 animals thrown in, it would be good if one could survive. Of course, they would also mate in there. Thus, more strange-looking animals were born. Where there were people, there would be rivers and lakes. Where there were many animals, there would also be a world of beasts. The animals in there were cruel elimination rounds, each wave stronger than the last. This beast valley had existed for 5,000 to 6,000 years. The animals in there grew stronger day by day. Occasionally, there would be strange roars from there, causing people to be inexplicably frightened. No one knew what was inside. After a long time, even the disciples of the Purple Cloud sect did not dare to casually enter the valley. Fortunately, the Purple Cloud sect master had set up a strong barrier outside the valley. This prevented the monsters in the valley from coming out and disturbing the balance of this world. This valley would only be open once a year, and each time it was opened, the purpose was to throw in new monsters. Every time Ji Xinyu passed by the valley, she would feel an inexplicable sense of trepidation. It was as if there was something extremely ferocious hidden inside, waiting to rush out and destroy the world. Because of this, she had once forced herself to persuade her master to change his bad habit of randomly taking in monsters, and told him about her feelings and concerns. At that time, sect leader Ziyin did not say anything. Instead, he directly brought her into the valley and let her examine it personally. There were indeed some strange hybrid monsters in the valley, as well as some ferocious beasts, but they were only ferocious beasts. Ji Xinyu could deal with them with one hand, so even if they ran out of the valley, they wouldn't be much of a threat. After seeing those animals, Ji Xinyu was speechless. Her master was indifferent to fame and fortune, and only had this little hobby. As a disciple, it was naturally not convenient for her to say more. Therefore, Ji Xinyu did not care about this place for the next few years. They were allowed to grow stronger year after year. However, every time she passed by the valley, she would feel a little uneasy, as if there were countless pairs of eyes staring at her. Chapter 2841. Almost everyone knew about this harmless hobby of sect master Ziyin, so there were many people who came this year, and the number of monsters that were sent was also the most. Some were carried by people, and some were sent in various cages. The disciples of sect master Ziyin were so busy receiving these things that their hands went limp. Ji Shunyu looked at the various monsters that she couldn't even name, and thought that the animals in the Beast Valley were going to party again. The weak ones became food inside, and the strong ones were busy using their claws and teeth to conquer. Every time, there would be a big commotion. Of course, the birthday gifts that people sent were not only all kinds of novel animals and plants, but also other rare treasures. Every time Ji Shunyu saw these gifts, she felt that her horizons had been broadened. No wonder Master was keen on celebrating his birthday. Just looking at these novel gifts was enough to make him happy. There were many people who came this year, so naturally, there were many gifts. Among these gifts, the gift from Rongyue Tianheng of the Eastern Sky Clan was the most special. He actually sent a beautiful snake woman with a human head and a snake body. This was a real beautiful snake woman. Her upper body was completely human, beautiful and alluring, with long seaweed-like hair, full breasts, slender waist, and even between her legs was a woman's part. Only her legs were together, forming a snow-white snake tail below. The beautiful snake woman was wearing clothes. In fact, they weren't called clothes but 2 pieces of muslin. They were wrapped around her chest and waist, covering the most private and important parts. As for the rest of her body, she was naked. There was a string of silver bells on her wrist. When she swung her snake tail forward, the silver bells jingled. She looked indescribably enchanting and charming. Her watery eyes seemed to be able to hook one's soul. When she glanced at someone, they could not help but feel a ripple in their heart. Such a stunner was carried in a box. After opening the box, the beautiful snake woman swayed out of the box, stunning the eyes of all the men present. Sect Master Ziyin probably wanted to take advantage of this birthday to find a decent son-in-law for his good disciple. Therefore, more than half of the people who were invited were young talents of this continent. In fact, these young talents also wanted to hug the beautiful woman, so they cherished this opportunity. Since coming to Sect Master Ziyin, they had shown their best side. As a result, people who were originally hot-tempered and boorish also looked gentle and refined here, appearing to be very cultured. Since they were here to propose marriage, they naturally couldn't show their perverted side. Therefore, before the snake beauty came out, these people's performance was still very remarkable. However, this snake beauty seemed to have a factor that would make men's blood boil at first sight. Once it appeared, many young geniuses stared straight at it. Some of them even had nosebleeds. His eyes stared straight at the snake beauty without blinking. Ji Shunyu looked at the beautiful snake woman, and her eyes almost popped out. Xie Fenglu, who was standing beside her, tugged at her sleeve. "Senior sister, you're a woman. Don't tell me you're also mesmerized by it?" Ji Shunyu was still staring at the snake beauty in a daze, as if a storm was raging in his heart. This snake beauty, it was very similar to the phaseless snake she had encountered in the Misty Mountain. Wasn't this snake a specialty of the Misty Mountain? Even in the Misty Mountain, it was pitifully rare and almost extinct. Moreover, only those who wanted to break off the engagement could enter the Misty Mountain. Where did Rongyue Tianheng get this snake from? Could it be that Rongyue Tianlan had caught him in the Misty Mountain and had specially given him to his cousin as a gift? Chapter 2842. Rongyue Tianlan had suffered from this type of snake before. Why would he have the time to do this? Or perhaps this snake was not a phaseless snake at all, but a special species? The beautiful snake greeted Grandmaster Ziyin with a sweet voice. The Grandmaster of the Ziyin sect lowered his eyes and looked at the beautiful snake. He smiled and said, "This gift is not bad. Where did you find it, little Marquis?" Rongyue Tianheng said proudly, "I found it in Tianheng Mountain. This woman is amazing. She is good at singing and dancing. When she sings, she can attract countless birds. She is good at talking. I have been traveling for many years, but this is the first time I have seen such a wonderful thing. I am here to present it to you as a token of my sincerity." This gift was indeed extraordinarily precious. Sect Master Ziyun's eyes revealed a hint of a smile. Many thanks, many thanks. Young Marquis is so thoughtful. Wuji, please accept this gift." Feng Wuji came up and looked at the beautiful snake. His lips twitched. Although it was a snake, It looked too much like a human. How could he get it down? The other animals were locked in cages and carried away in boxes. What about this beautiful snake? Was he going to drive it into the box too? He looked at the snake beauty, and the snake beauty's big watery eyes were also looking at him. The two of them forgot about each other for a moment, and then the snake beauty smiled sweetly. She actually coiled herself into the box, and her body leaned down, and the box's lid automatically closed with a bang. What a considerate snake beauty! Feng Wuji breathed a sigh of relief. He then sent someone to lift the box, but it was a little difficult to decide where to put it. Master would play with these little monsters for a few days every time. Before they were played with, they would be placed in the rare creature pavilion of the Purple Cloud sect. After he played with them, they would be put back in the Beast Valley. The other little beasts could be played with by Master. Was this beautiful snake also there for Master to play with? Master, where should I put this snake? Feng Wuji lowered his head and asked. Put it wherever the other beasts are. Do you have to ask? Grandmaster Ziyun glanced at his eldest disciple. Well, it seemed that Master did not treat this beautiful snake as a human at all. He treated it as a rare little beast. Then he would put it in the rare creature pavilion. The box was carried down. The master of the Purple Cloud sect asked Rongyue Tianheng amiably. Does the young Marquis have any requests? Rongyue Tianlan's handsome face turned red, and he shook his head. I don't have any special request. I just want to see the true face of Princess Xinyu. This request was unanimously agreed upon by everyone, and the surrounding people nodded in agreement. Sect Master Ziyun originally had one arm supporting his head, but when he heard this, he put down his arm and said indifferently, no matter how rare the beautiful snake is, it's just a rare thing. It can't be compared to my disciple's face. Regardless of whether or not Xinyu wanted to reveal her true appearance, that was her freedom. It was not something that could be exchanged with any conditions. If you're giving me this snake beauty because of this request, then I can only disappoint you. Your Excellency, please take back that snake beauty. He raised his hand and ordered his men to bring the snake back. Rongyushenheng hurriedly said, Sect Master, you've misunderstood. This snake is a birthday gift from Little Ho. I didn't use it as an exchange. That was just a wish of the little Marquis. Since the sect master was in a difficult position, then there was no need to care about this matter. Everything will be up to Princess Xinyu. After these words were said, Sect Master Ziyun did not say anything else. He probably did not want to owe anyone anything. In the end, he still said that he would agree to Rongyushenheng's request. However, if it was related to his female disciple, he would not do anything. Chapter 2843. Just like that, a small episode passed. The guests finally knew what Sect Master Ziyun's bottom line was. His female disciple was his bottom line. No matter what, nothing could compare to his female disciple. Ji Xinyu pursed her lips and looked at her master from behind the curtain. She felt tears welling up in her eyes. In this world, only her master was truly good to her. She did not have such deep feelings before, but now, she was full of gratitude. For her master, she would even be willing to bark like a dog, let alone acting like a man. The guests finally finished presenting their gifts, and everyone turned to look at Feng Wuji. Every year, Sect Master's birthday would have a new trick. What would it be today? Sect Master Ziyun also turned to look at his eldest disciple. What about your new trick? Feng Wuji bowed. I was about to present it to Master. I hope Master will like it. Sect Master Ziyun rested his chin on his hand and looked interested. Let's wait and see. Feng Wuji was actually not very confident. After all, his master did not like to watch plays. At most, he would listen to storytellers telling stories. He clapped his hands twice, and the stage was filled with the sound of a huqin, followed by the sound of an eru and a flute, as if it was the prelude to a play. A look of surprise appeared in everyone's eyes. It was normal to invite a troupe to perform on a birthday. It was the most common thing. But the disciples of Sect Master Ziyun were using a play as a new trick. Wasn't it a little too funny? Sect Master Ziyun only raised his eyebrows and continued to wait with interest. His disciples all knew that he did not like to watch plays. They should not have arranged a normal play to deal with him, They should have some big trick up their sleeves. Ji Xinyu and the others rehearsed in a secluded mountain, far away from the valley where sect master lived. Even if they played the suona loudly, sect master Ziyin might not be able to hear them. Furthermore, sect master Ziyin never peeked at the things his disciples prepared for him. According to his own words, the surprise on the day was the most important. If he knew in advance, it would be meaningless. Thus, sect master Ziyin did not know what Ji Xinyu and the others were doing for 2 whole days. As the music played, all the lights in the hall suddenly went out. While everyone was still in shock, a huge, colorful flower slowly rose into the air. When it reached the top, the petals slowly bloomed, revealing the golden boy and jade girl in the center of the flower. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that they were a golden couple. Jade Maiden was wearing a 7-colored long skirt with flowing cloud sleeves. She had big eyes and cherry red lips. Each and every one of her movements revealed a kind of enchanting charm, especially her pair of eyes. They were limpid as if they contained 2 bags of water, captivating the soul. The golden boy, on the other hand, was dressed in white. He had delicate features, and there was a heroic spirit in his eyes. The lights on the stage only shone on the 2 of them, and the background was dark. This made the 2 of them stand out even more. The 2 of them were extremely eye-catching in terms of appearance and attire. Countless people's gazes fell on these 2 people. When they saw them slowly descending from the sky, they pulled out a banner at the same time, one on the left and one on the right. On the left was written, "I wish Master this day every year, young and handsome." The book on the right reads, "I wish Master a long and prosperous life." Their left and right hands pulled out a banner for each other. "Happy birthday." Chapter 2844. The words were written like dragons flying and phoenixes dancing, looking very imposing. It was Feng Wuji's handwriting. What was even more bizarre was that when the 2 of them landed on the ground, the vertical banner and the horizontal banner in their hands turned into colorful flower petals. The flower petals flew down from the high platform in the form of a vertical banner and flew to sect leader Ziyun's side. After slowly circling him 3 times, it flew back to the high platform and turned back into the flowing cloud silk of the Jade Maiden. This scene was very beautiful and very special. Everyone loudly applauded, but the majority of the people's eyes were still fixed on the Jade girl, who was swinging her long sleeves and dancing. From the banner, everyone guessed that the 2 people performing should be sect leader Ziyun's disciples. Since sect leader Ziyun only accepted 1 female disciple, needless to say, the Jade Maiden on the stage should be Ji Xinyu, who was in the limelight recently. As for the golden boy on the stage, there were fewer people paying attention to him. After all, most of the people present were young geniuses, and there were very few women. There were only a dozen or so female guests, and most of them were already taken and came with their husbands. Even if they saw that the golden boy on the stage was very handsome, they didn't dare to cheer loudly. This way, the Jade Maiden on the stage, Shui Shiwu, was much better. When sect leader Ziyun saw his 2 disciples, he opened his eyes wide. Looking at the 2 people singing and dancing on the stage, the corner of his mouth slightly twitched. His eyes lit up, and he held his chin as he watched with interest. Feng Wuji had been paying attention to his master's expression, and seeing him like this, he finally let out a sigh of relief. This time he passed. His gaze also looked at the stage, and he couldn't help but give his 9th junior brother a thumbs up. In fact, they weren't really singing an opera, but singing and dancing with lyrics. The performance was also a golden boy and Jade Maiden birthday celebration. The lyrics were festive and cheerful, making people happy just by looking at them. On the stage, 9th junior brother's pair of flowing sleeves fluttered in the air, flying around Ji Xinyu, looking very harmonious. Apart from the birthday celebration, the lyrics were also the Jade Maiden boldly confessing to the golden boy. The Jade Maiden on the stage was very bold and romantic, chasing after the golden boy. The Sanning continent was very traditional. Men chasing after women was the absolute majority, and there were almost no women chasing after men. At least, there weren't any on the surface. On the other hand, the Jade Maiden on the stage was extremely bold. Her behavior was refreshing. Everyone at the scene was dumbfounded. Rong Yue Tianheng looked as if he had been struck by lightning. Princess Ji Xinyue was actually such a bold and unrestrained woman. As for her appearance, she was indeed beautiful. He was similar to the rumors, except that the lines on his face were a little more robust, and he looked very heroic. He glanced at the golden boy again, and his heart skipped a beat. The two people on the stage were wearing heavy colors, but Rong Yue Tianheng could still vaguely see Shen Yu's shadow on Jin Tong's face. Shen Yu, that kind of person, naturally would not come here to perform, but this appearance. This appearance made Rong Yue Tianheng's heart jump again and again. He had originally come to see the princess's true face, but at this moment, his attention was completely attracted by the golden boy on the stage. His eyes were fixed on the golden boy. Ji Xinyue was naturally the one playing the role of the golden boy. Just as she had expected, everyone's attention was on ninth junior brother, so she could easily perform. Her ears were sharp, and she could even hear the discussions of the people below the stage amidst the music. Most people are marveling at the princess's boldness and boldness. Chapter 28:45. Most people were amazed at the princess's boldness and boldness, saying that she was indeed a disciple of the Purple Cloud sect, the first woman to be bold and unrestrained in the Fanning continent, daring to perform such a hot performance. Ji Xinyue frowned slightly, knowing that these people were so conservative because they were in the Purple Cloud sect, and it sounded like praise. But in their hearts, they were probably scolding her for offending public morals, right? She had just recovered some of her reputation, and now there was going to be another watershed, with both praise and criticism. Fortunately, Ji Xinyue didn't care about this. Her master's purpose in organizing this gathering of young talents was clear as day. It was to let her show her face here, and let everyone know how good she was. Then, she would choose a good husband for her. Her master was like a father, and her master worried more than her imperial father. Ji Xinyue actually didn't have any hope for love, and didn't want to find another one. She felt that it was good to be alone and free. There were many immortals who didn't marry, and she didn't want to be one of them. She didn't want her future days to be spent in some palace, or in some courtyard. If this dance could dispel the thoughts of those young talents, it would save her a lot of trouble. Her eyes fell on ninth junior brother, who was looking at her affectionately. Ninth junior brother must have rehearsed this performance to block these rotten suitors for her, right? Ji Xinyue shuddered. Could these words be any more shocking? There was no such phrase during the rehearsal. To see you, I do everything possible. I like you, think carefully. Xie Fenglu continued to express his feelings. Because these words were added at the last minute, Ji Xinyue didn't know what to say in response, and could only smile stiffly, looking very pretentious. Xie Fenglu read a line to her. Do you like me too? How about we become husband and wife after the birthday celebration, and return home together? Since this play was a comedy, a play about lovers getting married in the end, Ji Xinyue hesitated for a moment before agreeing with a yes. However, just as she parted her lips, and before she could utter a single word, a strand of flute music abruptly joined in, instantly suppressing all the music. There were many talents in the Purple Cloud sect, and many of them were good at music. Therefore, the accompaniment for this show was the disciples of the Purple Cloud sect. Their musical instruments had already reached the point of perfection, and some of them could even control objects with sound. However, such superb playing skills were completely out of tune, due to the ethereal sound of the flute. It sounded strange and funny. After such an accident, Ji Xinyue naturally forgot the original lyrics, and looked in the direction of the flute sound. The sound of the flute seemed to be coming from outside. She couldn't see anyone playing the flute in the hall. When the flute sounded, her heart skipped a beat. She was very familiar with the sound of the flute. Among the people she knew, only Rong Yue Tianlan had such skills. However, logically speaking, he shouldn't have come, right? Or perhaps some other music expert had arrived. Or was it Old Ninth's plan to catch them off guard? She looked at Xie Fenglu. Xie Fenglu's face was covered with color, so she couldn't see his expression clearly. He was stunned for a moment, then raised his voice, and continued to ask the question. Chapter 2846. Carrot after the birthday celebration. Are you willing to marry me? This line was supposed to be an elegant and mellow song. But before he could finish, the sound of the flute suddenly increased in pitch. Xie Fenglu couldn't help but sing out of tune. The last few words flew straight up like 9 bends and 18 bends, and his throat was about to split from the shouting. When this strange sound came out, it naturally caused the people below the stage to burst into laughter. Even Ji Shenyue couldn't help but laugh out loud. As for the senior brothers who were pretending to be horses, tree stumps, and stones on the stage, they couldn't hold it in either. The 4 hooves of the horse stumbled and almost fell to the ground. The bent tree stumbled and fell to the ground, and the stones trembled as if they were suffering from epilepsy. They all thought that 9th junior brother was clowning around. He was really going all out for the sake of entertaining his relatives. Only Xie Fengliu's handsome face under the oil paint changed slightly. He took a step back and pressed his palm lightly on his chest. He seemed to be unwilling to give up. Just as he was about to ask again, Sect Master Ziyin, who was sitting at the head of the table, stood up and looked outside with a faint smile. Old friend, since you're here, why don't you come in? Why are you teasing my disciple? Who had come? Who could be called an old friend by Sect Master Ziyin? It's Sect Master's birthday. Tianlan is here to join in the fun. A clear and magnetic voice resounded. A faint light and shadow flashed in midair, and a person's figure appeared. A handsome face, a blue robe that fluttered like a sparkling lake, and a jade flute in his hand, attracted everyone's attention as soon as he appeared in the air. Someone had already called out, "Eighth Highness." "Your Highness Rongyue." The person who had come was Rongyue Tianlan. He smiled and nodded slightly at the crowd, and his gaze swept across the 2 people on the stage. Ji Shenyue, and his gaze met briefly in midair. Rongyue Tianlan seemed to curl his lips slightly at her, and his faint smile was very annoying. Ji Shenyue's heart skipped a beat, but she frowned. Why was he here? How could he recognize her in such a situation? Xie Fengliu's eyes were also looking at Rongyue Tianlan. When Rongyue Tianlan's gaze swept over, he looked back at him without hesitation. Rongyue Tianlan's gaze on him was calm, but faintly sharp. Xie Fenglu instantly had the illusion that he had been seen through with one glance. Fortunately, Rongyue Tianlan's gaze swept past him and left. The exalted immortal looked at Sect Master Ziyin and smiled. Sect Master's birthday is really unique. Even the sound of a pig being slaughtered can come in handy. When others saw his smile, it was a light and carefree smile. But Ji Xinyu could faintly hear a hint of gnashing teeth in his laughter. She frowned again. Could it be that Rongyue Tianlan was mocking her and Xie Fengliu's duet as the sound of a pig being slaughtered? What a vicious comparison. This person really had an unusually sharp tongue. She looked at Xie Fenglu again. Because he had the most lyrics, the sound of a pig being slaughtered was more likely to be used to describe him. Sure enough, Xie Fenglu glared at Rongyue Tianlan angrily. However, Sect Master Ziyin understood what Rongyue Shenlin was implying. He smiled lazily and deliberately misinterpreted. Is Rongyue disdaining my disciples' singing? He glanced at the guests present and sincerely asked for their opinions. Everyone, what do you think of the performance of my 2 apprentices? Are they worthy of the word's lingering sound? Everyone looked at each other. This question was actually very easy to answer, but because the 2 people had opposing opinions, they were apprehensive and did not dare to answer directly. Chapter 2847. No matter how they answered, they would definitely offend one of them. However, no one could afford to offend these 2 people. Therefore, everyone laughed in agreement. Only the disciples of the Purple Cloud sect and some outspoken people answered. Not bad, it's good. Both of your disciples performed well, especially this male-female disciple. Her singing was full of emotions, and it was a refreshing experience. The Purple Cloud sect master looked at Rongyue Shenlin proudly. The eyes of the masses are clear. Rongyue, what else do you have to say? Rongyue Shenlin looked at the cold but annoying face of the Purple Cloud sect master, and secretly clenched his fingers in his sleeves. Sure enough, his first instinct was right. This was a scam. Such a simple scam had actually fooled a smart person like him. just because he was afraid that something might happen. What if it was true? The death of the old purple cloud sect master was not to be regretted, but Ji Xinyue must not die. He had already rushed to the space-time gate out of the Sanyin continent. In the end, because of this what if, he had to rush back from thousands of miles away. If he did not rush back to take a look, he was afraid that he would not be able to sleep well during the 2-month journey. He had originally planned to take a look first and hide in the dark. It would not be too late for him to leave after confirming that the Purple Cloud sect was fine, and that Ji Xinyue was safe. With such a goal in mind, he ran for nearly 10,000 miles in an unjustified way. He urged the wind-chasing unicorn to use its maximum potential. After running for an entire night and an entire morning, he was so tired that he almost vomited. In the end, he saw the heavy traffic in front of the Purple Cloud sect, and Feng Wuji's happy face. Under such circumstances, the Purple Cloud sect would naturally be fine. Therefore he was indeed fooled. Rong Yuishenlin heaved a sigh of relief and clenched his fists. He had the urge to pull out the Purple Cloud sect master and beat him up, so that his birthday would be the anniversary of his death. He walked around the Purple Cloud sect and heard the Purple Cloud sect master's ferocious butchering in the kitchen. Naturally, he understood what he had heard. He touched the pig slaughtering knife and began to consider the possibility of stabbing the knife into the Purple Cloud sect master's neck. He walked around again. Originally, he wanted to leave quietly, so that the old man would not laugh until he got cramps. However, he did not expect to hear the sound of opera coming from the front. He knew that Grandmaster Zi Yin usually did not listen to operas. He also wanted to see what kind of birthday present Ji Xinyue had prepared for her master, so he hid himself in the air to take a look. In the end, he saw Ji Xinyue dressed as a man, and her junior brother, singing this kind of golden boy and jade girl play. It was undeniable that the two of them looked good in disguise. It was easy for people to associate them with the phrase, perfect couple. When he saw her, she was an eyesore, and he had the urge to kick her away. However, Xie Fenglu took this opportunity to confess to Ji Xinyue, and he seemed to have used some kind of technique. Once Ji Xinyue agreed, he might even get married to her. But that stupid girl didn't notice this, and actually jokingly agreed with the word okay. Only then did he interrupt them with the sound of his flute. Otherwise, this girl would sell herself off without even knowing it. Rong Yuetian could tell at a glance that this junior brother of hers had other feelings for her. Originally, he did not take it to heart, because he felt that Xie Fenglu and Ji Xinyue were not compatible. Chapter 2848. They belonged to the type of drama where the falling flowers had feelings for the heartless brook. But now, Rong Yuetianlan's gaze swept over Xie Fenglu again, his eyes faintly cold. After all, he was an exalted immortal who had cultivated for thousands of years. Once he released the pressure of an exalted immortal, he could still completely suppress Xie Fenglu, who had just cultivated to the supreme god level. Xie Fenglu didn't want to be afraid of him, but under the pressure of the other party, his legs couldn't help but go soft, and he almost knelt down. His eyes flashed, his body swayed, and he suddenly fell toward Xin Jiyue. Xin Jiyue subconsciously supported him. Xie Fenglu's body went soft, and he took advantage of the situation to fall into her arms. The two of them were originally singing an opera. They were wearing costumes and had makeup on their faces. At this moment, Xie Fenglu, who was playing the role of the Jade Maiden, fell into the arms of Ji Xinyue, who was playing the role of the Golden Boy, which immediately caused the audience below to cheer. However, just as the cheers rushed out of their throats, another shocking change occurred on the stage. Just as the Jade Maiden fell into the Golden Boy's arms, the Golden Boy suddenly stepped back. The Jade Maiden was caught off guard and fell onto the stage with a plop. This fall wasn't light for the Jade Maiden. She fell there and curled up, and couldn't help but cry out in pain. This cry of pain was a standard male voice. It was abnormally abrupt in the stunned silence of the audience. Everyone heard it. Why was the Jade Maiden's voice a man's? Could it be that the Jade Maiden wasn't played by Ji Xinyue, the only female disciple? Everyone stared at the stage with wide eyes, and then they saw a godly turn of events. The makeup on the Jade Maiden's face on the stage seemed to be washed away by a pair of invisible hands. A moment later, her true appearance was finally revealed. It was a delicate face. Although the eyes were watery and there were dimples on both cheeks, it was a man's face. He's not Princess Xinyu. Some people who had seen Ji Xinyu's true appearance in Misty Mountain cried out. He's the last disciple of the Purple Cloud sect master, Xie Fenglu, young master Xie. So it's not Princess Xinyu. I was wondering why her style of singing was so bold. This is what it means to entertain one's relatives. The Purple Cloud sect's disciples are really too good to their master. Like I said, no matter how much Princess Xinyu wants to make master happy, she can't throw away her face like that and do such a bold action. Everyone started to discuss spiritedly, as if they understood what was going on. Originally, they were secretly cursing Ji Xinyu in their hearts, but now, all of that naturally disappeared. Ji Xinyu's reputation was like a person who had just walked through the gates of hell and was silently washed clean. Xie Fenglu, on the other hand, was praised by everyone. His plan had failed. He was stunned for a moment before regaining his composure. At this point, he could no longer continue his act. Xie Fenglu took the opportunity to say a few words of congratulations to his master, and then left with Ji Xinyu. Sect Master Ziyun glanced at Rongyu Ishinlin with a complicated look in his eyes. He originally wanted to embarrass this guy and avenge his precious disciple, but he didn't expect this guy to have the ability to easily resolve the awkwardness. At this moment, he swaggered to the seat of honor not far away from him, looking like he was going to calmly watch the show. Although the other guests present had just seen a good show of a man playing a woman, they still didn't see Ji Xinyu. They couldn't help but feel regretful. Someone asked Ji Xinyu, as the only female disciple of Sect Master Ziyun, what surprise would she bring to their master? Chapter 2849. The purpose of these words was none other than to see Ji Xinyu, even if she came out to say a few words of congratulations. Sect Master Ziyun's expression did not change. Before he could speak, Rongyu Ishinlin had already opened her mouth while waving her fan. Princess Xinyu has already prepared a birthday present for her master, and she has already presented it to him. The blue pearl on Sect Master Ziyun's feathered crown was given by her. The pearl is for the Pearl King, and this pearl is worth hundreds of years of Sect Master Ziyun's birthday present. Sect Master Ziyun, don't you agree? Sect Master Ziyun. Most of the onlookers knew how difficult it was to obtain this pearl of fate. Gasps could be heard everywhere. Although it was a pity that they could not see Ji Xinyu's true face, they still felt that Rongyu Ishinlin's words were reasonable. Sect Master Ziyun glanced at Rongyu Ishinlin and said with a faint smile, Rong Yuejun really cares for my disciple. As expected, you have the bearing of an exalted immortal. Perhaps it would be better if Xinyu thanked you in person. He clapped his hands twice. Xinyu, come out when you're done. Ji Xinyu had originally wanted to go out alone to celebrate her master's birthday. Hearing her master's call, she walked out. At this moment, she had already changed into a normal Purple Cloud sect disciple's attire. She wore a light purple dress with rolling clouds, and her long black hair was casually tied up with a hairband. In the middle of the headband, a purple pearl was embedded in her forehead, making her eyes shine like stars. It was clearly a very ordinary attire, but on her, it was extremely outstanding. People could hardly take their eyes off of her. Those who had already seen her true face secretly heaved a sigh of relief, their gazes faintly burning as they looked at her. Those who had never seen her before also widened their eyes at this moment. They had a sense of recognition that the rumors were indeed true. She really was a peerless beauty. They felt that this trip was indeed worth it. Those young talents who had not yet married looked at Ji Xinyu with even more burning eyes, and were already planning how to win the heart of this beauty. Xinyu, this exalted immortal Rongyu, is Master's good friend. Originally, he was unable to raise his head in front of Master because of the wrong marriage with you. Fortunately, your marriage has been annulled, and he is now your elder. You two can get to know each other again, Sect Master Ziyun said. Ji Xinyu was slightly startled, but as expected, she stepped forward and bowed. Senior Rongyu, greetings. Rongyu Ishinlin's lips twitched. Before he had the chance to say anything, the Purple Cloud sect master once again spoke up kindly. Shinyu, don't call him senior. It makes him sound old and distant. It's better to call him uncle. Ji Shinyu readily accepted his advice, and was about to address him as uncle when Rongyu Tianlan decisively said, just address him as you did before. Don't change it. He did not want to be Ji Shinyu's elder. He had never thought about it. He also didn't have Shun Juli's heavy taste, who liked to flirt with the younger generation disciples. When he thought of this, he himself froze. When he saw Ji Shinyu talking about love, this was actually what appeared in his mind. He had long known that he liked Ji Shinyu, but knowing that he had wronged another woman in his previous life, and still having such thoughts subconsciously, it was worth pondering over. Rongyu Ishinlin admitted that she was a benevolent and magnanimous immortal. As an immortal, what they were most afraid of was owing someone a favor, and not being able to return it, especially this kind of emotional debt. Chapter 2850. He had originally planned to bring Ji Tianyue back to the Tianxi continent and raise her by his side, just like how the great god raised Ning Xuema. He thought that since he could fall in love with her in his previous life, he would definitely fall in love with her now. All he lacked was time. Perhaps after a few years, he would be able to develop feelings for her. By then, it would not be too late to talk about marriage. But now, his heart was deviating more and more, and it was getting harder and harder to control himself. Seeing Ji Shunyue in front of him being so courteous to him, as if he was an elder, he felt extremely uncomfortable. But he could not say anything at the moment. After all, he and Sect Master Zi Yin were of the same generation. Sect Master Zi Yin raised his teacup and took a sip, then said indifferently, previously you were engaged, so naturally, you should treat each other as equals. But now, you are no longer related to each other. You and I are friends, and you are old enough to be her uncle. Shinyu should call you uncle. This seniority cannot be messed up. Shinyu, offer this Uncle Rongyu some tea. Ji Shinyu agreed, then poured a cup of tea and handed it to Rongyu Tianlan with both hands. Uncle Rongyu, please have some tea. Rongyu Tianlan. He secretly gritted his teeth and looked at Sect Master Zi Yin with a smile that was not a smile. Old friends, old friends. A friend's disciple may not be my own junior. Moreover, we are friends despite our age difference. Our seniority does not involve our disciples. I have always treated your disciple as equals, and we are also friends. There is no distinction between senior and junior. Just call her how you used to call her, and get used to it. We immortals do not care about such formalities. Ji Shinyu saw that he was entangled with seniority, and was momentarily stunned. She did not know why he was so concerned about this. Then, she suddenly thought of Ji Tianyue, and immediately understood. Rongyu Tianlan was going to marry his sister. Because of Ji Tianyue, he could not be his future wife's uncle. Ji Shinyu finally figured out what he was worried about. She didn't want to become an obstacle for others, so she smiled faintly. If we're of the same generation, then so be it. Perhaps Rong Yuejun has his own difficulties, and needs Shinyu to be of the same generation as him. Rongyu Tianlan was stunned. He looked at Ji Shinyu with a deep gaze. He bet that there was a distance between the difficulties Ji Shinyu spoke of, and the difficulties in his heart. Furthermore, the distance between them wasn't small, but it didn't seem easy to explain. He didn't say anything for a while, so Ji Shinyu took it as his silence. He took a few steps back, and put some distance between them before bowing to his master. Master, this disciple is willing to perform a sword dance to congratulate Master on your birthday. Please take it as a small gift that disciple has prepared for Master. Naturally, Sect Master Zi Yin would agree to this request. After nodding his head, he propped his chin up and waited in high spirits. He didn't forget to explain to Rong Yuishinlin. This seat's female disciple is actually very good at dancing. It's just that she doesn't usually like to dance. Even I can't force her to dance. It's rare that she's interested in dancing today. He excitedly ordered Xie Fenglu, who had already changed back into his normal disciple uniform. Ninth brother, play for your senior sister. How could Xie Fenglu be unwilling? He immediately agreed, and took out a zither from his storage space. There was even a zither table and a zither stool. He sat there and looked at his senior sister with bright eyes. Senior sister, what sword dance do you want to perform? Harmony between the zither and the zither? A phoenix seeking a phoenix? Or a perfect pair? Chapter 2851. Ji Xinyu's sword was already in her hand. She had the urge to cut this little rascal. What nonsense was this? She only liked to dance one dance in public, returned triumphant. When had she danced the others? This little rascal was obviously looking for a beating by singing so many sour songs. Return triumphant. She spat out these 3 words. She still left some face for her junior brother in front of others. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. Xie Fenglu tactfully responded, not daring to pluck the fur from the tiger's mouth. Rong Yuetian watched the interaction between the two of them, waving his fan without any reaction. He had never heard of this song before, so even if he volunteered to accompany her, he did not have the capital to do so. But Ji Xinyu's dance. He had seen it once, when she was drunk, dancing alone under the moonlight. Although her steps were staggering, it was still very interesting. Now that she was sober, what would it be like to dance? Ji Yu's solo dance suddenly appeared in his mind. Her sleeves fluttered in the wind, as intoxicating as a beautiful flower. After a burst of intense music, Ji Xinyu had already flown to the center of the stage. Kicks, bends, splits, twirls, the sword flashed like flying frost, the figure spun like falling snow. Her dance had the gentleness of an ordinary dancer, but also the freedom and casualness of a swordsman. Rong Yuetian looked at the graceful figure on the stage, and could not help but think of Ning Xiuma's poem that described sword dance. Huorui shot the 9 sunsets, like a group of emperors flying in the sky. It came like thunder, it stopped in anger, it stopped like the clear light of the blue sea. Rather than calling it a dance, it would be better to call it a swordsmanship. The combination of swordsmanship and dance was flawless. The surrounding people were all mesmerized and amazed by her movements and stillness. They were reluctant to even blink their eyes. Rong Yuetian was very accomplished in singing and dancing. He had seen countless songs and dances in his life, but this was the first time he was so engrossed in a girl's solo dance. The fan in his hand could not help but beat to the beat. It was his first time seeing this dance, but he felt that it was inexplicably familiar. It was as if he had seen some of her movements a long time ago. He thought of Ji Yu again. Ji Yu's dance was completely different from her dance style, but the flexibility of her body, the degree of bending, and even the movement of her fingers. There were similarities between the two, especially the orchid finger formed by the left hand, which was different from the orchid finger formed by ordinary dancers. It was unique. Ji Yu and Ji Xinyu's orchid fingers were shockingly similar. Rong Yuetianlan stared at her delicate little finger, and her heart seemed to be in turmoil. If Ji Yu was only the reincarnation of Ji Xinyu's soul, then even if they had no memories of each other, their deep-rooted habits would still exist. For example, the current dance was clearly 2 different styles, but they had some small overlapping habits. Could it be that Xinyu was Ji Yu? Did he get the wrong person? But if Ji Yu was the reincarnation of Ji Xinyu's soul, why didn't she have any resemblance to Ji Xinyu in terms of appearance and personality? Why was she exactly the same as Tianyu? This didn't seem to make sense. Could it be that Ji Xinyu was also envious of Ji Tianyu? Envy that she can easily obtain the love of her parents. Envy that she can grow up innocently and carefreely. Because of envy, it formed an inner demon, and when one of her souls escaped, she was reincarnated as the little princess Ji Yu. Because she was so envious, this reincarnated Ji Yu not only looked exactly like Ji Tianyu, but also imitated her personality. Chapter 2852. Was that so? Was that so? Rong Yuishanlin's fingers turned white as he held the fan. If Ji Xinyue was really Ji Yu, then his previous rejection of the marriage, was he not asking for trouble? However, as long as Ji Xinyue was Ji Yu, even if he was asking for trouble, he would accept it. He would rather she had been Ji Yu. He would rather work 10,000 times harder to remarry her. It was better than them not being the same person. Could they be the same person? Rong Yuishinlin pondered as he watched the song and dance. If she became a demon in her heart because of envy, causing a part of her soul to escape and reincarnate, then the soul that escaped must be her heart soul. The heart soul was responsible for envy, jealousy, and other emotions. The appearance of the heart soul could indeed be different from the main soul. If it had been reincarnated, then this heart soul would retain the appearance of its previous life. In other words, if he guessed correctly, her current heart soul would be like Ji Yu's. He only needed to find an opportunity to take out her heart soul to take a look, and he would know. He looked at Ji Xinyue, who was dancing gracefully, and his heart was burning. He felt that he could not wait any longer. He twisted his fingertips, and the jade flute appeared in his palm. Sect Master Ziyun glanced at him and transmitted his voice. "What is Rong Yuejun doing?" "Good dance, good music, I will accompany her." "Do you know this song?" "After listening to it once I know it." Rong Yuishinlin answered simply. He had already heard Xie Fenglu play it once, and it was enough for him to remember the tune. The flute sounded leisurely, and tactfully joined in. The flute was low and melodious, but the guqin was sonorous and powerful. Logically speaking, the guqin could only suppress the flute, but the flute could never suppress the guqin. However, after a while, the guqin could no longer be heard in the audience, only the flute's sound lingering in the field. The flute's sound naturally replaced the guqin's. They were obviously two very different instruments, but the switch did not feel abrupt at all. It was as if this song should have been played by the flute in the first place. The sound of the zither just now was actually very good, but compared to the sound of the flute, it was like the difference between the sound of nature and ordinary music. The latter could be completely ignored. Xie Fengliu's baby face was slightly red. He tried his best to take back the initiative, but even though he had played with all his might, the sound of the zither was still drowned out by the sound of the flute. He was so close to the zither, but he could not hear his own music clearly. Now it was no longer a competition of musical instruments, but a secret battle of psychokinesis. It was obvious that Xie Fenglu had been completely defeated in his anger. Xie Fenglu played a few wrong notes in succession. Fortunately, the sound of the zither was suppressed by the sound of the flute. Even if he made a mistake, he wouldn't be able to tell, because the transition between the two instruments was too natural. Ji Xinyu, who was dancing to the music, did not notice it at all. She only felt that the music made her movements smoother and more natural. Even her heart was swaying along with the music. Unknowingly, she was completely immersed in the dance. It was as if she had put on a pair of red dancing shoes. She could no longer stop, nor did she want to stop. Other than the melodious sound of the flute, the hall was completely silent. Everyone held their breaths, not even daring to breathe too loudly. They were all intoxicated, completely immersed in the flute's dance, and could not bear to wake up. Rong Yuishinlin had already stood up at some point, and while playing the flute, he walked around Ji Xinyu. His feet naturally followed the beat, and his clothes fluttered. His body movements were in sync with Ji Xinyu's. He was not dancing, but he was more harmonious than any other man dancing with her. Chapter 2853. Ji Xinyue was completely immersed. At this time, she forgot the knot in her heart that she had for Rong Yuishinlin, forgot that she had secretly vowed to stay away from him, and also forgot the honor and humiliation that this person had brought to her. She naturally jumped along with his steps, the sword light flashing, but not a single sword light touched the corner of Rong Yuishinlin's clothes. As the two figures staggered, Rong Yuishinlin's fingers stroked her hair. This stroke was also a light one, as light as a feather. Not only did others not notice it, even Ji Xinyue herself did not notice it. She only felt her heart inexplicably jump, and there was a short buzzing sound in her head. He was too close to her, so close that she could smell the faint plum fragrance on his body. Rong Yuishinlin's body turned and suddenly retreated. The sound of the flute in his mouth missed a beat, and Ji Xinyue seemed to have finally reacted, and he could not help but stop in his steps. The sword in his hand was originally slanted to the left, but because of the wrong step, the sword stabbed straight towards Rong Yuishinlin in front of him. Rong Yuishinlin's reaction was a little slow at this time. He could have easily dodged it, but he actually reacted before he remembered to dodge. After all, he was a little late, and it was too late for him to dodge. He could only use his fingers to pinch it. He pinched the bright blade of the sword. Ji Xinyue's sword was bestowed by the Purple Cloud Sect Master. It was a divine sword, and it was said that it was made from the bones of some strange beast. It contained the evil spirit of this strange beast, and not only could it cut through hairs, but it could also break all protective enchantments. Therefore, although Rong Yuishinlin pinched the blade of the sword, the blade also cut his fingers. Fresh blood dripped down, dyeing the bright blade of the sword red. Ji Xinyue's expression changed slightly, and his wrist paused, not daring to move at all. He looked at Rong Yuishinlin's pale face. You. Perhaps it was because of the injury. Rong Yuishinlin's face was extremely pale. He took a step back, and quickly wrapped the sword wound in his palm. He took another step back, and tripped on something, and his body staggered, almost falling. Ji Xinyue felt guilty, and quickly reached out to support him. I'm sorry, are you okay? Rong Yuishinlin took another step back, and forced a smile. I'm fine, it's my fault, you don't have to take it to heart. Indeed, he could only blame himself. He had practically bumped into the tip of the sword himself. Brother Rongyu! An exclamation came from the direction of the door. A small figure rushed in and grabbed Rongyu Tianlan's sleeve. Her pretty face was full of heartache. You're injured. She then raised her eyes to look at her elder sister. And without thinking she blurted out. Third elder sister. Why are you so careless? The one who ran in was Ji Tianyue. Ji Shenyu looked at her sister who had suddenly barged in, and frowned slightly. Today was the Purple Cloud Sect leader's birthday. In order to welcome the guests, the gates of the Purple Cloud Sect were open to the public. Therefore, as long as everyone had an invitation, they could enter and leave at will. As for Ji Tianyue, she probably didn't have an invitation, but a few years ago, she had followed her sister to the Purple Cloud Sect out of curiosity. The little girl was lively and active. She had only stayed in the Purple Cloud Sect for 5 or 6 days, but she had already gotten along well with everyone in the Purple Cloud Sect. During those days, she often went in and out of the Purple Cloud Sect. The disciples guarding the gate already knew her, and were very familiar with her. The gatekeeping disciple didn't know that Ji Xinyu and her sister already had a grudge against each other, and even treated her as a respected guest. Chapter 2854. Therefore, after she arrived, she told the disciples guarding the door that she wanted to give her sister a surprise, and the disciples let her in. Along the way, for the same reason, she openly barged in and directly barged into the hall. She happened to see Ji Shenyu dancing, and Rongyu Tianlan being the accompaniment, and even getting injured. She pulled Rongyu Tianlan's sleeve, and wanted to see his injury. She couldn't help but grab his hand. Rongyu Tianlan probably didn't expect her to appear at this time. In addition, his reaction had been half a beat slower, so he only reacted after his hand was grabbed by Ji Tianyue. He frowned slightly, and instinctively waved his hand. Ji Tianyue didn't have much kung fu on her, so she was thrown out by his wave. Bam! She fell off the stage, and directly hit a table. The dishes and wine on the table were all served and filled to the brim. After being smashed by her, the plates and cups all flew up and clattered. Some of them fell to the ground, and some of them clattered onto her body. Fortunately, Rongyu Tianlan just waved his hand subconsciously, and didn't use any telekinesis. Although she fell in a sorry state, she didn't suffer any injuries. The little girl jumped down from the table with her head and body covered in soup. Her pair of big eyes looked at Rongyu Tianlan, who had just reacted on the stage. She pursed her lips and burst into tears. Rongyu Tianlan's action, just now, was an instinctive reaction without thinking. At this moment, seeing Ji Tianyue fall in such a sorry state, he was also stunned. He jumped up and landed beside Ji Tianyue. He endured the pain in his fingers, and cast a cleaning spell on her body, wanting to tidy up the little girl again. But after all, he had just used a spell and was injured. Coupled with his unstable state of mind, the cleansing spell was a little messy. He only managed to clean some of the soup and water off her body, The stains were still on her body, and even her hair was still dripping with vegetable soup. Ji Tianyue looked at him anxiously. Brother Rongyue. She wanted to grab Rongyue Tianlan's sleeve again. However, she had just suffered a loss and was still a little scared. She only tried to pull it. Rongyue Tianlan stepped back, and Ji Tianyue grabbed nothing. She was stunned for a moment, and the tears that she had just stopped came out again. The veins on Rongyue Tianlan's forehead popped a few times. He secretly took a deep breath and finally calmed down. Tianyu, why are you here? Looking at the vegetable soup dripping from her head, he couldn't bear it, and was about to cast a second cleansing spell. Casting the cleansing technique required him to form a series of hand seals. His palm was injured, so he couldn't help but touch the wound. He frowned again. Let me do it. Ji Xinyu finally couldn't stand it anymore. Her sister had made such a big fool of herself, and she also lost face. She made a series of hand seals and cast a spell. After a faint flash of light, Ji Tianyue's body finally felt refreshed. Ji Tianyue brushed her hair and shook her skirt to make sure that there was nothing wrong. Only then did the tears on her pretty face stop. She softly said the reason for her visit. It's elder sister's master's birthday. Imperial father asked Tianyue to come and celebrate the birthday of elder sister's master. Tianyue has been rushing for the past few days, but I didn't expect that I would still be late. Her reason was quite reasonable. Ji Xinyu frowned slightly, but didn't say anything else. She glanced at Rongyue Tianlan's hand. Rongyue Tianlan's finger injury was not light, and because it was caused by the divine sword. Chapter 2855. Rongyue Tianlan's finger injury was not light, and because it was caused by the divine sword, it was not easy for the wound to heal immediately. At this moment, blood had dyed the bandage on her hand. She paused, thinking that her medical skills were average, and Rongyue Tianlan was a divine doctor himself. Such a small injury should be nothing to him, and he did not need her concern. Therefore, she only nodded slightly at Rongyue Tianlan. When she turned her head, she saw Xie Fenglu bleeding from the corner of his mouth. She was shocked and walked over quickly. Old Nine, are you injured? Xie Fenglu was injured because his zither could not withstand Rongyue Tianlan's flute music. He refused to admit defeat, and insisted on resisting. In the end, he was hit by the zither music, and suffered internal injuries. Blood had been flowing from the corner of his mouth for a while, but because too many things had happened, everyone's attention was on Ji Xinyu, Rongyue Tianlan, and Ji Tianyue, who came on later, so no one noticed him. Ji Xinyu was the first to notice that something was wrong with him. Xie Fengliu's baby face was already a little pale, and when he got up he staggered. Ji Xinyu hurriedly helped him up. What's wrong? You can get injured from playing the zither? She was too engrossed in dancing, and did not notice the secret battle between Rongyue Tianlan and Xie Fenglu. After she helped him up, she was about to let go of him when Xie Fengliu's body tilted and fell towards her again. Ji Xinyu could only support him again. What's wrong with you? Xie Fenglu leaned on her body, panting slightly. I'm a little dizzy. Ji Xinyu casually took his pulse, and found that his pulse was light and floating, and it was beating much faster than usual. It was indeed a symptom of internal injury. How did you get injured? Ji Xinyu asked as she helped him off the stage. Xie Fenglu looked at her sadly, then looked at Rongyue Tianlan, who was still standing on the stage. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, and he leaned closer to Ji Xinyu. He did not want to say that he was defeated by Rongyue Tianlan. He only answered vaguely. Playing the zither consumes a little more telekinesis. It's okay, I'll be fine after some rest. Sect Master Ziyin, who had been watching everything from the sidelines, rested her chin on her hand and looked at Ji Tianyue. It's rare for your imperial father to be so considerate. I wonder what gift he has brought for me. Ji Tianyue was circling around Rongyue Tian. She had to answer Sect Master Ziyin's question. She could only bow and present the gift that the South Heaven Emperor had asked her to bring, a fist-sized luminous pearl. The luminous pearl was a rare item, but it could be found everywhere in the Purple Cloud sect. The Purple Cloud sect master glanced at it, and gestured for Feng Wuji to take it. He then said, This luminous pearl is not bad. Put it in the stable to light up the horses. Feng Wuji nodded and left with the luminous pearl. No matter how naive Ji Tianyue was, she knew that the night-luminescent pearl that her imperial father fished out of the House of Treasures on a whim was not well received. She grumbled in her heart that her imperial father chose such an unpresentable gift while glancing at her elder sister. Ji Xinyue was busy treating Xie Fenglio's injuries and did not pay attention to her. She pursed her lips and smiled sweetly at Sect Master Ziyin. Tianyue is willing to dance for Sect Master as a birthday gift. Sect Master Ziyin did not object. It's rare for you to be so considerate. Dance then. Ji Tianyue pursed her lips again. I wonder if Tianyue can ask the senior brothers of the Purple Cloud sect to accompany me? Chapter 2856. Sect Master Ziyin did not object, so he let the music disciples prepare, and let Ji Tianyue say the name of the song. But after Ji Tianyue said the name, no one knew the song. Ji Tianyue looked at Rongyue Tianlan eagerly. Brother Rongyue, you're probably the only one who knows this song, but your hand is injured, so playing the jade flute will be a hindrance. Why don't you say the song and let the musicians here play it? Not everyone in this world was as smart as Rongyue Tianlan, who could play any song immediately after hearing it once. Even if Rongyue Tianlan wrote out the score directly, those people would have to practice it a few times. Rongyue Tianlan casually glanced at Ji Xinyu, who was beside Xie Fenglu, asking about his well-being. He took out the jade flute and said indifferently, "No need for them, I'll accompany you." Ji Tianyue's eyes lit up, and her little face was full of joy. That's great. Thank you, Brother Rongyue. But your injury? It's just a small injury, it's not a problem. Rongyue Tianlan had already calmed down. He glanced at Ji Xinyu, who was focused on Xie Fenglu at the moment. She was using telekinesis to heal him, so she did not look at him at all. Rongyue Tianlan's lips twitched slightly, as if he was smiling, but he did not know if he was smiling at himself or at someone else. He had already sensed that the injury on his hand had damaged his tendons and veins, and even some of the bones in his palm had been cut. At the moment the pain was unbearable. The sword belonged to Ji Xinyu, so she should know the consequences of injuring someone with this sword. But she chose to ignore it and care about Xie Fenglu, who was far less injured than him. It was as if she did not see that his palms were bleeding non-stop. Even though the blood had already stained the gauze, Rongyue Tianlan lowered his eyes slightly. He quickly treated the injury on his hand, applied the corresponding ointment, and hit his own acupuncture points. Finally, he succeeded in stopping the bleeding, and then wrapped it up again with bandages. He played the jade flute again. This time, it was just a normal play, and he did not use any telekinesis. Ji Tianyue danced to the sound of the flute, and the song she danced was the same one she had danced in front of Jun Liuye that year. Her figure was graceful and beautiful. Everyone present was an expert in this field, so they could naturally see the pros and cons seeing that Ji Tianyue could perform such a standard dance at such a young age. Everyone gave her a warm round of applause. Ji Xinyu's dance was a combination of hardness and gentleness. It had the strength of ice and snow, but also the gentleness of a willow. When the two were combined, it gave off a shocking effect. On the other hand, Ji Tianyue's dance was graceful and feminine. Her waist was like a willow, and her arms were like soft silk. She had the soul of a superb dancer. The dance of the two sisters could be said to have their own characteristics, and there was no distinction between them. This was Ji Tianyue's best dance. Every time she danced, she would receive thunderous applause, and this time was no exception. It wasn't until the thunderous applause rang out that Ji Xinyu noticed the commotion over here. She just happened to see her sister's fluttering skirt fall to the ground, and Rongyue Tianlan had just finished playing the last note. She had just put down the jade flute in her hand. Ji Tianyue was in high spirits as she slightly bowed towards the crowd. Her etiquette was thorough and her smile was as sweet as honey, and Rongyue Tianlan's gaze was also looking at her, the corners of his mouth hooked up in his usual smile. Ji Xinyu also smiled. Her little sister was indeed talented in dancing, and it was common for her to win applause. She was also the pride of her imperial father. Every time there was a state banquet or a major festival, the South Heaven Emperor would always let her little sister dance. Chapter 2857. A few years ago, before her cultivation went berserk, she had envied this and secretly practiced this dance. Now that she thought about it, it was just a joke. Why did she have to learn from others? Everyone had their own strengths and weaknesses, and they were good at different things. Why did she have to follow others' footsteps? Because she had thought about this, Ji Xinyu suppressed this dance to the bottom of a box in her mind. She felt embarrassed dancing it herself, let alone performing it in front of others. Therefore, no one in this world knew that she could dance this dance, and she was not prepared to let anyone know. Ji Tianyu's dance won countless praises. Words like this dance could only be found in heaven, and how many times could it be seen in the human world? And so on were not plentiful. Ji Tianyu was praised until she was floating in the air, and regained the feeling of being the center of attention. There were also people who were unconvinced. I think Princess Xinyu's sword dance was better and more imposing. There were also people who retorted, of course the sword dance is better, but the word dance is about gentleness and beauty. The sword dance is slightly lacking in this aspect. I don't think it's lacking. Princess Tianyu's dance can actually be performed by dancers. But Princess Xinyu's dance is unique. No one can compare. There were also people who agreed. That's true. I believe Princess Xinyu can also perform this dance. But Princess Xinyu definitely can't perform Princess Xinyu's sword dance. Naturally, Ji Tianyua heard the discussion below. She couldn't hold back her anger and retorted. No one can dance this dance of mine. There are so many dancers in the palace who want to learn this dance, but none of them can. Xie Fenglu had already returned to normal under Ji Xinyu's treatment. At this moment he could not help but chuckle. That's because those dancers are too stupid. If it was my senior sister, she could learn this dance immediately. Maybe she already knew it, but was too lazy to perform such a childish dance. Ji Tianyu was anxious. No. Her eyes turned to Ji Xinyu. Third sister, do you know this dance? Thus, everyone's eyes focused on Ji Xinyu. Even Rongyi Yuishinlin's gaze turned over, as if waiting for her to explain. Ji Xinyu frowned slightly. This kind of argument was simply too childish. She said bluntly, I won't. Everyone. Rongyi Yuishinlin's eyes dimmed slightly. Ji Tianyue, on the other hand, revealed a proud expression. She looked at Rongyue Tianlan with her big eyes and said, Brother Rongyue, this dance is my original creation. Is it nice? Beautiful. Rongyue Tian said these two words, but her heart slowly sank. He had already taken a look at Ji Xinyu's soul, but it still looked like Ji Xinyu. There was no trace of Ji Yu at all. At that time, he didn't give up, fearing that he would make a mistake in his judgment. So he used his psyche power to examine all of Ji Xinyu's other souls with his heaven's eye. There wasn't a single soul missing. Every one of them looked like her, and none of them looked like Ji Yu's. In other words, her soul had always been in perfect condition, and there was no such thing as her soul escaping and reincarnating. His previous deductions were all wrong. Ji Xinyu was Ji Xinyu. She was not Ji Yu. His hopes were dashed. Although Ji Tianyu's temperament was becoming less and less like Ji Yu's, her characteristics were becoming more and more like Ji Yu's. Their appearances were similar, their personalities were similar, and even the dance that Ji Yu left in his mind was created by Ji Tianyue. All the evidence pointed to one thing: Ji Tianyue was Ji Yu. Chapter 2858. Perhaps Ji Yu was the reincarnation of one of her souls. Or perhaps Ji Tianyue was the reincarnation of Ji Yu. After all, the timeline of the Fanning continent was different from that of the previous continent. The death and reincarnation of people from different continents and different spacetime could not be inferred by normal years. For example, his reincarnation of Jun Liuya died at the age of 26. On the other hand, Rongyue Tianlan's soul escaped and reincarnated more than 500 years ago. 500 years later, on the eve of Shen Jiuli's return from that continent, his soul returned, and he also succeeded in his tribulation. Therefore, he could not use the age of the two sisters to calculate who was Jiyu. He could only compare them one by one. The result of the comparison was hopeless. Ji Tianyue was most likely Jiyu, but he had fallen in love with another woman. Even if he knew that Ji Tianyue was Jiyu, he still could not develop feelings for her. Rongyue Tianlan felt that he had never been so sad in his life. He did not want to let down Jiyu in his previous life, but he also did not want to lose the happiness of this life, because of his previous life. He was confused for a moment, and felt that he needed to sort out his current situation. It was not suitable for him to stay here any longer. Moreover, he did not want to see Ji Shunyue care for Xie Fenglu, so he stood up and said goodbye. Sect Master Zi Yun looked at him with some dissatisfaction, and reminded him tactfully, Rong Yuejun, you are a good friend of mine, and you came all the way here to celebrate my birthday. You must have prepared a very special gift. I wonder if you can take it out now to broaden everyone's horizons? Rongyue Tianlan was stunned. He had suffered too many setbacks today, so his reaction was always half a beat slower. After thinking for a while, he realized that Sect Master Zi Yun was asking him for a birthday gift. He came in a hurry and did not prepare to show up at this birthday banquet, so he did not prepare any gifts. Fortunately, he had brought a lot of things with him. He casually took out one. It was a bloodstone ornament, which he found when he was traveling in other continents. At that time, he felt that this bloodstone was red and festive, so he casually threw it into the storage space. After a long time, he forgot about it. Now that he took it out, it was a gift for Sect Master Zi Yun. The bloodstone was not big, only the size of an egg. It was shaped like a heart, and there were even veins on it. It was naturally formed and looked very rare. The Fanning continent didn't produce this. Sect Master Zi Yun was very interested after seeing it. He immediately ordered Ji Xinyu. Xinyu, show it to me. The veins on Ji Xinyue's forehead bulged. Wasn't eldest senior brother always the one who received the gifts? Why was her master assigning her now? Subconsciously, she didn't want to be involved with Rongyu Tianlan. She wanted to stay as far away from him as possible. However, today was his master's birthday. His words were like an imperial edict, and could not be disobeyed. She had no choice but to step forward unwillingly. She first thanked Rong Yuetian according to the rules, and then took the bloodstone from his palm. When she took the bloodstone, her fingertips inevitably touched the gauze on his palm. Because of the movement just now, the wound on his palm had split open a little more. At this moment, the gauze was faintly dyed and looked very conspicuous. It gave her the urge to peel off the gauze to see the wound. Fortunately, she stopped this unreliable thought in time. She abruptly moved her eyes away, and presented the bloodstone to her master. Grandmaster Zi Yin liked the bloodstone very much. He played with it in his hand. Chapter 2859. Ji Xinyu returned to Xie Fengliu's side. He was still weak, so she was using her telekinesis to heal him. She needed to continue. Xie Fenglu leaned weakly on the chair, paying attention to Ji Xinyue's every move. When he saw her return, he heaved a sigh of relief. My chest still hurts a little. Senior sister, can you heal my heart first? Ji Xinyue glared at him. Your heart is still beating. How can you be hurt? You're messing around again. Sit down obediently. Wait for me to open up the sealed veins on your back. Your injury will be almost healed. Yes, senior sister, be gentle and slow. If you're too fast, my veins will be in pain. I know, I didn't expect you to be so weak. You're like mud. Ji Xinyue mocked him as she tried her best to heal him. Rongyue Tianlan glanced at them, then looked away. He finally officially bid farewell. Ji Tianyue also bid farewell with him, catching up with him in a few steps. Brother Rongyue, I want to go back too. Let's go together. The two figures quickly disappeared at the door. Brother Rongyue, this place is too far away from Nantian Palace. Can you send me back? Rongyue Tianlan walked very fast. Ji Tianyue had to jog to catch up with him. After leaving the Xian sect, she couldn't help but make her request. Rongyue Tianlan stopped in his tracks and finally turned to look at her. His gaze was somewhat cold, making Ji Tianyue's heart tremble. Rongyue Tianlan looked at the little girl, and suddenly felt a little funny in his heart. He Rongyue Tianlan had lived a carefree life. When had he ever been unable to let go of his feelings, and been schemed against by a little girl? Because he felt that she was Jiyu, and also because of the guilt from his previous life, he tolerated her many times. He tolerated her little tricks in front of him, and tolerated her little habits. But his tolerance didn't mean that he had no bottom line. No matter how much he loved Jiyu in his previous life, he just couldn't fall in love with Ji Tianyue now. He even hated some of her actions more and more. His first feeling when he saw her was a headache. His second feeling was that he wanted to slap her away. Forget it. Say that he had a change of heart. Say that he was heartless. He couldn't lie to himself anymore. Whether Ji Tianyue was the Jiyu of the past or not, he couldn't live with her. He was now absolutely certain of this. Ji Tianyue was not his type at all. Even if Ji Shenyue did not appear, he would not be able to convince himself to fall in love with Ji Tianyue. Love was a match of the soul, and it couldn't be forced. If he forced himself like this, wouldn't he be asking for trouble? He had tried his best, but he couldn't. He really couldn't. Even if he desperately forced himself to accept Ji Tianyue, he was afraid that in the future, they would be a resentful couple. For the sake of Jiyu's face, he could protect Ji Tianyue. But he couldn't sacrifice his own feelings, therefore. It was time to sever everything. Even if he were to be despised by the almighty couple in the future, he did not want to force himself like this. He turned to face Ji Tianyue, who was nearly a head shorter than him, with an indifferent expression. Tianyue, I think we should have a good talk. Ji Tianyue's heart jumped inexplicably, but she still looked elated. Tianyue also wants to talk to brother Rongyue. Why don't you send me back and we can talk in the car? Rongyue Tianlan strode forward and said, There's no need. Besides, men and women shouldn't touch each other. It's not suitable for me to be alone with you. If you want to talk to me, then come with me. Chapter 2860. Ji Tianyue's intuition told her that he was not going to say anything good. She paused and took a step back. Brother Rongyu, my father is still waiting for me to go back. Let's talk later. I'll get in the car first. She whistled at the sky, and her luxurious car, which was specially made by Nantian Palace, descended from the sky and landed beside her. The two maids bowed to her and invited her to get in the car. Ji Tianyue hurriedly got into the car. She did not hear any movement from Rongyu Tianlan, so she could not help but look back. Rongyu Tianlan did not even look back. He continued to stride forward. His faint voice came through the wind. If you don't talk now, you don't have to talk in the future. Ji Tianyue was speechless. She hesitated for a moment, but still jumped out of the car and hurriedly followed him. Rongyu Tianlan chose a small pavilion to talk. The pavilion was like a 10-mile-long pavilion, close to a crossroad. Occasionally, pedestrians would pass by in a hurry. The place was bright and spacious. Talking here would not cause any criticism. Ji Tianyue followed him into the pavilion nervously. She forced a smile and said, Brother Rongyu, what do you want to talk to me about? Since Rongyu Tianlan had confirmed his feelings, he naturally did things more straightforwardly. He asked directly, Tianyue, do you like me? Ji Tianyue blushed. This. In the end, she stuttered and admitted, Yes, I have always liked Brother Rongyu. I fell in love with you the first time we met. What's more, Brother Rongyu also likes Tianyue. So Tianyue is very happy. No, I don't like you. Rongyu Tianlan interrupted her. Ji Tianyue's face turned pale. She was about to refute when Rongyu Tianlan continued. I'm sorry to give you such a misunderstanding. But it's time to end this misunderstanding. I did treat you well. But that's because you look like a woman I once loved deeply. I loved that woman, but I can't like you. I can't agree with some of your actions. Although you look similar to her, some things in your bones are different. You and her are two different people. I can't empathize with you. So I'm sorry. Ji Tianyue's face turned even paler. She finally understood why Rongyu Tianlan was so caring towards her the moment they met. She thought that it was her charm that made this extremely outstanding man unable to resist. It turned out that it was because she resembled another woman, his former sweetheart. She panicked. What about her? What about the woman you loved so much? She was enlightened. She's dead, isn't she? So when you saw me, you thought I was her reincarnation, right? This little girl was smart enough. Rong Yuetian didn't say anything. He disdained to use lies to deceive a little girl. Ji Tianyue knew that she had guessed correctly. A light flashed in her eyes. She tried her best to straighten her back in front of him, so that he could pay attention to her. Brother Rongyu, maybe I am her reincarnation. Although I can't remember my previous life, I had a good impression of you the moment I saw you. I have a special liking for you. Perhaps this is the result of our marriage in our previous lives. I've never liked someone so much. She stretched out her hand and wanted to pull Rongyu Tianlan's sleeve. Brother Rongyu, you can treat me as her. I'm not afraid of being someone else's substitute, as long as you let me stay by your side. Chapter 2861. Rongyu Ishinlan took a step back. When he didn't want anyone to touch him, he wouldn't let anyone touch him. His eyes darkened. Ji Yu might have been naive back then, but she was also proud. She could love someone without hesitation, but she would never be entangled with someone who didn't love her. If she was willing to be someone else's substitute, could that still be called love? Even if she was willing, he wasn't. He recalled the scene when Ji Yu was dying. She hated him before she died, and didn't even want him to hug her. If she really had any wishes in her heart at that time, it would probably be to never see him again, to never cross paths with him again in the next life. If she really had the emotions of her previous life in the next life, he reckoned that she would subconsciously hate him and want to stay away from him, instead of falling in love with him regardless of everything. Was Ji Tianyue really Ji Yu? Looking at it now, except for the appearance and the naive and arrogant temperament, where else did they resemble each other? Forget it. It didn't matter whether she was Ji Yu or not. Whether she was Ji Yu or not, he wouldn't love her. As long as he knew this, it was enough. Rongyu Ishinlan didn't want to be entangled with her anymore, so he said lightly, no need to say anymore. No matter how much you say, I won't like you, or even hate you. The last sentence was very hurtful. Ji Tianyue's face turned pale, but she still didn't give up. Brother Rongyu Ishinlan, if you did something wrong because of me, I can change. For you, I can change anything. Could something in her bones be changed? For example, selfishness and coldness. Rongyu Tianlan's sleeve shook, and a golden talisman appeared in his palm. After all, I've caused you to have some misunderstandings. In order to compensate, I'll give you this talisman. You can use it at the most dangerous time. At that time, I'll protect you once. But that was only once. If you use it, then the debt between us will be completely settled. You're on your own now. With a flick of his fingertips, the golden talisman landed in Ji Tianyue's hand. Ji Tianyue passively caught it. When she looked up again, the gazebo was already empty, and Rongyu Ishinlan was nowhere to be found. Ji Tianyue did not expect that this would be the consequence of following them. After being stunned for a while, she burst into tears. She could no longer hold it in and shouted, I don't want this kind of compensation. I only want you. I've already given up my reputation, but you don't want me anymore. Why? Why? Her cries were very loud. When passers-by passed by, they trembled in fear when they heard her cries and screams. Such a beautiful little girl was actually crying and scolding like a shrew. It was too challenging to their worldview. Who was this? Who was this shrewish little girl? She was dressed very elegantly, so how could she throw a tantrum without caring about her image? She seemed to be crying because she wanted to stick to a man gradually. The pedestrians on the road gathered from afar and looked at her, as if they were looking at a Western scenery. They were all guessing her identity and background. This was probably the first time Ji Tianyue had suffered such a blow in her life. She was already a little hysterical. All she wanted to do was to vent out the grievances and injustice in her heart. She did not even realize that there were people watching. Brother Rongyu, how can you be so cruel? For you, I traveled thousands of miles to Misty Mountain. For you, I stayed in a tent in Misty Mountain for more than 10 days. For you, I endured the ridicule of everyone. For you, I offended my sister. Chapter 2862. For you, I don't want any face. The whole continent knows that I like you. But you don't want me anymore. We're even. How can this be? You should be mine. She was crying loudly here. Her maids had already run over, and wanted to persuade her to go back to the carriage, so as not to lose the princess's decorum. But Jian Yu had nowhere to vent her anger. The maid's persuasion only added fuel to the fire. In her anger, she pulled out her sword and slashed at the two maids. Scram. Scram. Don't care about me. You're not good people. Fortunately, in order to protect her, the South Sky Emperor sent her maids with good martial arts, so they wouldn't be killed by her sword. The little princess was angry. The two maids didn't dare to do anything to her, and could only dodge again and again. Jian Yu saw that the two lowly maids didn't dare to stand there obediently, and let her slash, and became even angrier. So you're also fake to me. If the monarch wants the subjects to die, the subjects have to die. Now that I want you to die, you still dare to dodge. Rebel. Really rebel. You're dodging now, right? When I go back, I'll let my father kill your 9 generations. Her sword danced like snowflakes, as if she wanted to kill the two maids under her sword. And her last sentence also had an effect. The two maids' faces changed greatly. They were only children of a poor family. They were forced to enter the palace to be maids. Their parents and relatives were the only warmth in their hearts. If their 9 generations were killed, the two maids didn't dare to dodge. They gritted their teeth and faced the flashing sword light. People cherished their lives. Even maids were no exception. For their families, they didn't dare to dodge, and could only use their arms to block. Puff. 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 A few sounds were heard. The two maids' arms were each hit several times. Jian Yu used a lot of strength, and the sword in her hand was sharp. She actually managed to cut off half of the maid's arm. The other maid wasn't any better. A large piece of flesh was cut off from her arm, and the bones in her arm were also pierced through, blood splattered. The two maids each let out a miserable cry and staggered back a few steps. The onlookers were angry. At first, they thought that it was fine for a spoiled princess to throw a tantrum. They were happy to see a joke. However, when they saw that the two maids were seriously injured, and that the princess had no intention of stopping, some people could not stand it anymore. Pa! A small stone flew out of nowhere and struck Jian Yu's wrist. Jian Yu felt a sharp pain in her wrist. She could no longer hold the sword in her hand, and it fell to the ground with a clang. Who? Which bastard dares to attack me? Are you tired of living? Jian Yu's eyes were bloodshot as she looked at the people around her. At this moment, she no longer had the dignity of a princess. Instead, she looked more like a bloodstained demon. There were more than a dozen onlookers, young and old men and women, but they really didn't know who threw the stone. However, everyone looked at her with anger and disdain. These people were dressed very plainly. They should be the villagers of the nearby mountains, and there were no nobles of special status. A group of lowly commoners dared to attack a noble princess. Jian Yu almost grew up in the palace. In the palace, she could get whatever she wanted. No one had ever disobeyed her. Now, she encountered people who challenged her dignity as a princess one after another. Not only was she abandoned by the person she loved, she was also ridiculed by a group of lowly commoners. Chapter 2863. The fire in Jian Yu's heart, that was already burning, rose half a day high. She bent down to pick up the sword, looked at the people around her, and coldly ordered the 2 injured maids. Kill these lowly people who dare to offend me. The 2 maids were in so much pain that their faces turned pale. They were desperately pressing their acupoints to stop the bleeding, and when they heard the order, they were stunned. The ground under their feet did not move. Jian Yu angrily said, "Didn't you hear my order? Princess, you can't kill the innocent. His Majesty has said it before." One of the maids tried to refute. Her broken arm was still on the ground, and she was in so much pain that she was about to faint, but she still held on. Innocent? They are not innocent. They dared to attack this princess. That is an act of treason and rebellion. If you kill them, this consort will forgive your disrespect towards this consort and spare your lives. Otherwise, not only will you die, but your families will also die with you. The two maids each staggered a step back. Princess, they are not the subjects of the Nantiung clan. Even if they are not the subjects of the Nantiung clan, how can they be so disrespectful to the princess of the Nantiung clan? There is no such thing in the world. Lowly people are lowly people, no matter where they go they are lowly people. Ji Tianhua curled her lips in disdain. There were indeed many ordinary people in the surrounding onlookers, and ordinary people did not dare to provoke the nobles. However, it was rare to see a foreign princess being so arrogant in their territory. Ordinary people were already hostile to the nobles, and now this princess was so arrogant and despotic that it aroused their hatred for a common enemy. These people looked at each other, pulled out their weapons, and looked at the master and the two maids. Their eyes flashed with a fierce light, especially when they looked at Ji Tianhua. Their eyes were full of hatred. Lowly people. She actually called them lowly people. So what if they were lowly people? Could lowly people be casually killed by this so-called princess? They looked around. This place was very desolate, and they could not see anyone. If they killed the princess here, no one would know. There was no lack of martial arts among the onlookers, and two of them were even quite good at it. Even if a hot-blooded man was at the bottom of society, he would not be able to endure such humiliation. There were already people who wanted to kill this princess to vent their anger. Although the sword in the princess's hand was not bad, her kung fu was not good enough. In the eyes of a martial arts expert, it was not enough. It shouldn't be difficult for them to kill her. As for the two maidservants, not only were they heavily injured at this moment, they even hated the princess. Even if they attacked, the two maidservants might not be willing to sincerely protect the princess. This was a very simple logic, and everyone quickly understood. They looked at each other and stepped forward with their weapons in hand. Someone sneered and scolded. "A little shrew like you is called a princess? Don't embarrass the princess. She's probably that Ji Tianhua who was chasing after that man? She heard that when Her Highness Rongyu went to Misty Mountain, she didn't even ride in the same carriage as her. In order to force Rongyu to comply, she purposely created public opinion outside, saying that Her Highness Rongyu was with her. TSK, how shameless. That's right. Only a shameless princess would do such a thing to ruin her own reputation. She probably wants to use fait accompli to force Her Highness Rongyu to comply, right? Unfortunately, Rongyu did not buy it. Chapter 2864. She probably wants to use fait accompli to force Her Highness Rongyu to submit? Unfortunately, she didn't fall for it at all. Now she's saying that she abandoned her after seducing her. Did she seduce her? Seduce her, my ass. Everything is just her own wishful thinking. I heard that although Her Highness Rongyu sent her back from Misty Mountain, she didn't even ride in the same carriage as her. She did it out of concern and kindness for the child, but she misunderstood. She's too shameless. She snatched her own brother-in-law so righteously, but she still made a scene here when she couldn't. TSK, she's really unparalleled in the world when she's shameless. Since these people already had the intention to silence her, they naturally didn't have any scruples when they spoke. Of course, they also spoke the truth. There was no such thing as an airtight wall. Ji Tianhua's running after Rongyu Tianlan, and her performance in Misty Mountain, had already been recorded in the Jianghu. It was just that it didn't reach Ji Tianhua's ears. This was the first time Ji Tianhua heard this, and she was furious. Her hand holding the sword was trembling. Kill them. You two useless things are just going to let them slander me. Kill. 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 Otherwise I'll exterminate your 9 generations. My two maidservants, why are you still risking your lives for such a princess? She stabbed you until you're seriously injured, and she doesn't even see you as human beings. Why are you still working for her? Someone began to persuade the two maidservants. You're already crippled. Even if you go back, she won't want you anymore. If she's slightly dissatisfied, she'll say that she'll exterminate your 9 generations. How many of your 9 generations can be exterminated by her? It's better to go all out and kill her now, so that she can't bully you anymore. Those people didn't want to make more enemies, so they tried their best to pull the two maidservants into their camp. The two maidservants were seriously injured, and what they needed most was treatment, but they were pushed into a dilemma. These onlookers had helped them just now, and they were very grateful. So they didn't want to attack these people. However, they could not listen to these people and turn against them. It wasn't that they were blindly loyal to the princess, but that the South Heaven Emperor had placed the princess's safety in their hands. If they couldn't protect her and let her be killed here, then what awaited them when they returned was a cruel death. If they didn't return and directly escaped from here, then their families would also be implicated. That would be the true crime of exterminating their entire family. None of their family members would be able to escape. This was the sorrow of being a lowly maid. They were helpless. Furthermore, this princess definitely had more than two maids by her side. She also had shadow guards. Otherwise, why would the South Heaven Emperor be willing to let her out like this? These shadow guards wouldn't appear easily, but once they did, it would be an absolute killer move. These people were no match for these shadow guards. They had already unsheathed their swords, and were desperately using their eyes to signal these people to leave. Unfortunately, these people were born in the countryside, so they couldn't think so thoroughly. Apart from a few people who began to retreat, the majority of the people did not retreat, but instead advanced, surrounding them from all sides. Tianyu sneered. A bunch of country bumpkins wanted to challenge her. The princess? They must be tired of living. She raised her hand and shot out a firework. That was the signal to summon the shadow guards. Once these shadow guards arrived, these commoners could forget about escaping. Chapter 2865. One of the maids was quite chivalrous. In a hurry, she flew up and used her sleeves to extinguish the firework that had yet to rise into the air. She shouted, "You guys run. You'll be finished when the shadow guards arrive." Everyone was stunned. Only then did they understand. They shouted and scattered in all directions. Tianyu was furious. Her people were actually siding with outsiders. She raised her hand and released 3 or 4 more fireworks. At the same time, she held her sword and charged towards the maid. "I'll kill you, you bitch!" The maid couldn't stop her in time, and could only watch as the 3 or 4 fireworks rose into the sky. A moment later, 8 shadow guards in black appeared out of thin air. Tianyu gave an order, and the 8 shadow guards immediately chased after the fleeing people. These shadow guards were all well trained, and were the elites of the Nantiang clan. It was not difficult to deal with these commoners who knew some martial arts. Tianyu only gave them one order: kill. Kill all of them without leaving a single one alive, because they had offended the dignity of a princess. There was no right or wrong in the eyes of the shadow guards, only the master's orders. Therefore, these people's butcher's knives were directed towards the commoners. The 2 maids were full of despair. One of them was still being chased by Tianyu, while the other knelt down in front of Tianyu. "Princess, they are just commoners. Although they have offended the princess, their crime is not worthy of death. Princess, you have always been merciful. You can't even bear to hurt little rabbits and butterflies. Why do you have to kill people? This must not be your intention, right?" Tianyu was slashing at the maid who didn't dare to fight back. Hearing the other maid's pleas, she kicked her fiercely. Scram. There is only one word for anyone who offends the princess' dignity: death. She kicked the maid on her injured arm, and sent her tumbling to the ground. The other maid was hit again. Her shoulder blade was almost cut off by Tianyu's sword. The maid screamed and fell to the ground. Tianyu stabbed the maid's heart with her sword. "Go to hell, bitch!" Chi. A sharp sound was heard. A light green stream of air directly attacked Tianyu's wrist. Tianyu's wrist shook, and the sword flew out of her hand and into the sky. In the sky, it seemed to have encountered some fatal airflow. In the blink of an eye, it turned into pieces and fell to the ground. Tianyu's wrist hurt like a knife. She jumped up. Who dares to attack the princess?" "It's me." A cold voice came from the sky. The voice was clear and cold, but it spread to every corner of the wilderness. "Everyone stop." The maid who had just escaped death was stunned for a moment before she jumped up. "Third princess, The other maid was already in despair, but after hearing this voice, she seemed to be revived. She said in a trembling voice, "Third princess, it's the third princess." Although the shadow guards who were chasing after the commoners were under Ji Tianyue's command, they were only protecting her under the emperor's orders. They had to obey any princess or prince of the royal family. Therefore, Ji Xinyu's words were very shocking. Those shadow guards immediately kept their weapons and stood in place. As for the commoners, they had heard of the reputation of the third princess and knew that she was chivalrous. Their hearts moved and they stopped running. Ji Tianyue appeared very quickly. Just as her voice fell, she also appeared out of thin air and landed in front of Ji Tianyue. Chapter 2866. She was still wearing the dress she wore during the sword dance. It was obvious that she had rushed here directly from the banquet. Ji Tianyue's expression changed slightly when she saw her. Third sister. Ji Xinyue looked around and stopped at the two maids who had been cut so badly that they almost didn't look human anymore. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Her gaze was as cold as ice and fell directly on Ji Tianyue. Ji Tianyue, what's going on? Although there was already hostility between the two sisters, this was the first time Ji Xinyue looked at her with such a cold gaze. Ji Tianyue instinctively shrank back and blinked her eyes, tears already coming out. Third sister, you hurt me. Originally, when she cried, her third sister would comfort her and even hug her. But now Ji Xinyue's gaze was as cold as ice. She was not moved at all. Explain. Her little sister would usually be sad for a long time, even when a rabbit was hurt, and would ask the imperial doctor to treat it. But now, she had hurt two maids like this. What was the reason? The two maids were almost covered in blood and trembled on the ground. Third princess, save us. Third princess, please ask Princess Tianyue not to hurt our family. No matter what, it's our fault. It has nothing to do with our family. The maid who had lost an arm and was being chased by Ji Tianyue knelt on the ground, her other hand still holding a sword. Third princess, although we have disobeyed the little princess's orders, we had no choice. We definitely did not want to rebel. This servant is willing to die as an apology, but please don't harm my family. She turned her hand and slashed the sword at her own neck. Ji Xinyue was extremely fast. With a flick of her finger, the sword in the maid's hand flew out. Tell me the truth. Tell me the truth first. Ji Xinyue's voice was cold. She had rushed here in a hurry and was still confused about the details. Naturally, she wanted to find out the truth first before making a decision. The two maids were heavily injured, but they could still hold on. Ji Xinyue waved her sleeve and brushed it over their bodies. With this wave, she had already used a spell to stop their bleeding, so their lives were not in danger for now. Her wave even had an anesthetic effect, reducing the pain on the two maids by half. Third sister, it's them who are treacherous. They actually sided with these bandits and wanted to rebel against me. Ji Tianyue was the first to cry out. Tears fell down her cheeks as she felt extremely wronged. Ji Xinyue was already immune to her tears and directly looked at the two maids. Do you have anything to say? The two maids prostrated themselves on the ground. They were mid-level maids in the palace and were not well informed, but they still knew that Ji Xinyue had always doted on her little sister. If the little princess was occasionally bullied, the third princess would definitely help her little sister get back at her. Now would she uphold justice for these lowly people? For a moment, neither of the two maids dared to speak. Ji Tianyue said coldly from the side, "You'd better not talk nonsense. Otherwise, even if this princess has a good temper, I won't forgive you." The two maids trembled even more, not daring to open their mouths. Ji Tianyue's threat might have felt flawless, but in Ji Xinyue's eyes, it was child's play. She sneered, "You two only need to speak the truth. Remember, this palace master only wants to hear the truth. Don't even think about it." Third sister, they will talk nonsense. They haven't even said anything yet. How can you say that they are talking nonsense? Ji Tianyue, are you feeling guilty? Ji Xinyue's words were sharp. Chapter 2867. Ji Tianyue. She glared fiercely at the two maids. I don't believe you dare to spout nonsense. These words startled the two maids, causing them to shrink back again. As long as you don't spout nonsense, I can let your families go and not implicate you. Otherwise, Ji Tianyue threatened them. Ji Xinyu looked at all of this coldly. She originally thought that her sister was despicable, but she wouldn't hurt the two maids like this if they hadn't done anything wrong. Now that she saw their reactions, Ji Xinyu roughly deduced the truth. Tianyue, you said that these two maids colluded with outsiders to harm you? Yes, that's right. Fortunately, I reacted quickly and summoned the shadow guards in time, so I was able to avert the danger. Ji Xinyu picked up the severed arm from the ground and looked at the cut on it. She said carelessly, this arm was also cut off after you summoned the shadow guards to punish the two maids? Yes. Ji Xinyu turned to ask the shadow guards. When did you appear? Did you appear after seeing the summoning fireworks? The shadow guards had a strong sense of time, so they immediately agreed and told her the time they appeared. Ji Xinyu turned to look at Ji Tianyue. Look at the cut on this arm. It has been cut off for at least 3/4 of an hour. And you summoned the shadow guards for at most half an hour, which means that you were the one who cut them first. Ji Tianyue didn't expect her to be waiting for her here. After a moment of shock, she corrected herself. I remembered wrongly. They were the ones who attacked me first. I slashed them out of self-defense. The two of them suddenly attacked you together? Ji Xinyu didn't change her expression. Yes, that's right. Very good. Ji Xinyu smiled, but her smile was cold. According to my calculations, these two maids are at the 5th level of martial strength. And Tianyue, your martial strength is at the 3rd level. 2 high-level martial strength ambushing a low-level martial strength, and still being cut to this state by the low-level martial strength. Ji Tianyue, do you really think your third sister is an idiot? Ji Xinyu rolled around in a pile of blades all year round, so she was very good at analyzing injuries. No one could hide from her. Ji Tianyue usually only saw her gentle love for her, but she didn't know what ability her third sister had. At this moment, she was stunned by Ji Xinyu's question, but she still defended herself. That's because my sister was attacked and knew it was dangerous, so she fought back with all her might. Sister, haven't you heard that one person's life? Your martial strengths so far apart, you can achieve this effect, I've learned. Ji Xinyu's. If you two were to fight, how much power can you use? From Ji Xinyu's words just now, the two maids had already vaguely understood that this third princess really wanted to uphold justice, and was not biased towards her younger sister without any reason. Their courage immediately grew by a lot, and they also dared to speak the truth. Tianyue, est. Ji Xinyu looked at Ji Tianyue again. Her wrist was a little red and swollen, but she didn't see any other injuries. Ji Xinyu raised her hand and threw a small bottle of ointment to Ji Tianyue. Use this to rub your wrist, the swelling will subside. Ji Tianyue didn't know what her sister was up to, but she accepted the ointment. Chapter 2868. Ji Tianyue didn't know what her sister was up to. She took the ointment and tentatively touched her wrist. It was cool and comfortable, and also stopped the pain. She immediately smoothed out the red and swollen areas on her wrist. Ji Xinyu's ointment had a miraculous effect on this kind of injury. Ji Tianyue's wrist quickly became less swollen. Ji Xinyu casually took out a sword and handed it to her. Use this to protect yourself. Ji Tianyue was overjoyed. She thought that Ji Xinyu finally believed her, and immediately took it. Ji Xinyu crossed her arms. Let me see 2 sword flowers. Ji Tianyue wanted to show off her skills. She really did use the sword to make 3 or 4 sword flowers. The sword flowers were scattered, and they looked quite good and had a lot of strength. Looks like Tianyue's wrist has recovered. Looking at your sword flowers, you should be able to use 70 to 80% of your power. Ji Tianyue nodded. Should be about right. Ji Xinyu took a step back. That's good. She turned to look at the two maids. Since Tianyue said that you were the ones who ambushed her, then you must have used all your strength. Now you can attack her again. Let me see if she will be cut to this state. She then looked at the pale Ji Tianyue. At that time, they were not injured and yet you were able to cut them to this state. Now they can't even use 30 to 40% of their power. If they fight you again, they will only be at a disadvantage. Don't you think so? Ji Tianyue. This. She didn't think that her sister would dig such a trap for her to jump into. She was stunned for a moment then refuted. Sister, you know that I'm timid. I don't even dare to kill a chicken. If I wasn't forced, I wouldn't have cut them to this state. Now I'm regretting it. I can't cut them anymore. I don't want to fight them again. Even if you don't want it, you still have to. Ji Xinyu didn't have any room for negotiation. They will use all their strength. If you don't use all your strength, you will be killed by them. She then instructed the two maids. Now you don't need to ambush them. Just fight openly. You only need to use all your strength. Only then can we truly restore the truth. The eyes of the two maids lit up slightly, but they still had some misgivings. If we hurt the little princess, will our families be exterminated? This was what they were most concerned about. Ji Xinyu only replied with 2 words. No. The eyes of the two maids immediately lit up. 2 pairs of eyes looked at Ji Tianyue. They had suffered a lot in front of Ji Tianyue. Every day, they would be beaten and scolded. Now that they had been crippled by her, the hatred in their hearts had long since filled their chests. It was only for the sake of the safety of their families that they had been holding back. Now that there was such an opportunity, they would really be fools if they were to be timid. Ji Tianyue shuddered. No, I don't want to. 2 maids covered in blood had already rushed over with their bare hands. Although the 2 maids only had 30 to 40% of their martial arts left, their skills were much higher than Ji Tianyue's. Coupled with their rich experience in fighting enemies, how could the weak Ji Tianyue be their opponent? In just 3 moves, Ji Tianyue was sent flying twice. This was also because the 2 maids didn't have any swords in their hands, and Ji Tianyue had the advantage of carrying a sword. If the 2 maids also had swords in their hands, Ji Tianyue's body would probably have a few more holes. Chapter 2869. Ji Tianyue's hair was disheveled, and her clothes were in a mess. When she was kicked out, she hit the railing of the pavilion. Not only was there a bruise on her stomach, even her back was in pain, and she almost fainted. She was scared and angry as she desperately pounced towards the shadow guards. Why aren't you protecting me? While the shadow guards were stunned, Ji Xinyu's voice rang out. They are just simulating the scene. You don't have to do anything if the shadow guards are not involved. If anything happens, I'll take responsibility. Since the 3rd princess had said so, the shadow guards were happy to not bother about this matter. When they saw Ji Tianyue pouncing over, they all dodged. As for the commoners who were once chased, when they saw the princess being beaten, they all felt elated and started to gather from afar. Since they had already made their move, the 2 maids also threw caution to the wind. Being crippled like this, they had no intention of living. As long as their family members were not harmed, they would naturally take revenge. It didn't matter if they didn't have a sword or a weapon, they still had hands and legs. Palm shadows filled the sky as they moved around Ji Tianyue like they were flying. Ji Tianyue didn't receive any help, and she was completely panicking. Like a little lunatic, she waved her sword wildly. Although the sound of her slashing was like the wind, she couldn't even touch a corner of the 2 maids' clothes. Pfft! She was hit in the chest again, and she saw stars. Before she could react, she was kicked in the waist again, and her body flew out again. This time, she flew out at the wrong angle, and her head directly hit a huge rock. She hurriedly raised her arm, wanting to use her sword to block the momentum. However, the force of her collision was too great. The sword did hit the rock, but after piercing halfway, the sword broke with a cracking sound. Instead, her face slammed into the sword's edge. If this hit, Ji Tianyue's head would be cut in half. Ji Tianyue almost fainted from fright. She screamed, "Help!" and closed her eyes. A red rope flew over in time and wrapped around her waist. With a swing, Ji Tianyue fell to the ground with her head and legs upside down, finally avoiding the disaster of being cut in half. It was her first time experiencing this kind of life and death situation, and her eyes were wide open. He stood there in a daze, unable to react for a moment. Those shadow guards also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although the third princess said that she would take responsibility for this matter. If the little princess was really killed here, they would still be punished when they returned. Therefore, it was a good thing that the little princess was saved. Ji Xinyu retracted the red rope around her wrist and looked at her coldly. Aren't you able to risk your life in a life and death situation? Would they be able to defeat them? Why not now? They didn't even have weapons, yet they still suffered such heavy injuries. Where are your skills? Ji Tianyue burst into tears. This time, she was crying for real, without the slightest bit of water. However, she had been beaten up after all, so she couldn't cry out even if she wanted to. This was because if she exerted any force, her stomach would hurt so much that she would cry and suck in a breath of cold air. Coupled with her disheveled hair and swollen face, she looked particularly comical. The two maids were actually eager to give it a try. In any case, they had already beaten up the princess. Even if it was a capital offense, they had already committed it. He wished he could kick this princess a few more times, and slap her a few more times. However, it was obvious that the princess wasn't going to fight anymore, so they naturally couldn't take the initiative to charge forward. Chapter 2870. You're bullying me. Third sister, you're biased towards these bitches. You used to love me a lot, but now you're working with outsiders to bully your own sister. You must hate me for stealing your fiancé, right? That's why you're here to take revenge. Ji Tianyue was ashamed and angry, and began to speak without thinking. I'm only reasonable. Ji Xinyu's voice was calm. As for the fiancé you mentioned, he was indeed my fiancé, but I didn't break off the engagement because of you. If I wasn't willing, do you think you could steal him? A lover who can be stolen is not worth keeping. Don't you understand this principle? This was the first time Ji Tianyue had been taught a lesson like this. Now that the fight was over, her temper rose again, and she looked at Ji Xinyu with eyes that were about to spit fire. You're just jealous of me. You're taking revenge on me. You don't have to make it sound so nice. They were clearly the ones who offended my dignity as a princess. They were clearly in the wrong, but you used tricks to make them attack me, too despicable. I'm going to tell father. Father will uphold justice for me. She then looked at the two maids, her eyes full of hatred. You actually dared to attack me. When I return, I'll exterminate your 9 generations. I'll first throw your family members into prison, then torture them to death. Before she could finish her venomous words, she heard a "pa" sound. Her right cheek was fiercely slapped. This slap was extremely heavy, and she was forced back a few steps, falling to the ground with a plop. She covered her mouth and looked at Ji Xinyu in disbelief. You hit me? Yes, I hit you, and I'm teaching you a lesson as your elder sister. Ji Xinyu's face was also ashen, and she said word by word. Ji Tianyue, you're a princess, not a shrew on the streets. You have to take care of your own identity. I originally thought that you were just a little willful, and a little selfish because you were spoiled, but I didn't expect you to become like this. Full of lies, arrogant and despotic, vicious and willful, selfish and heartless. If I don't teach you a lesson, who knows what you'll do in the future? It doesn't matter if you're embarrassing yourself, but you're embarrassing the entire Nantian clan. When Ji Xinyu said this, she was still speaking from her older sister's position. She was truly lecturing her younger sister. Ji Tianyue flew into a rage out of humiliation. She jumped up and blurted out, "Embarrassing? You still have the cheek to say it's embarrassing. The one who truly shamed the Nantian clan is you. Who was it that was scolded as an abandoned woman and a jinx? Who was it that became the laughingstock of the Nantian clan? It's you. I have always been Imperial Father's pride. You must be jealous of me. It must be because Brother Rongyu hates me, so he's suppressing me here, deliberately making things difficult for me. They damaged my dignity as a princess. I wanted to get back at them, but not only did you not help me, you even joined forces with them to bully me. I don't want to acknowledge you as my sister anymore. I want to sever all ties with you." She was making false accusations here, and the onlookers at the side could no longer listen to her. Someone stood up and exposed her, telling her how she had been crying and yelling here, and how her maids had come to console her. But she had vented all her anger on the maids, heavily injuring them, and then forced the maids to kill the surrounding people to silence them. This person was quick to speak, and spoke in an orderly manner. He did not exaggerate, nor did he simplify anything. He explained the matter clearly and clearly. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.